And welcome, everybody. Another Sunday, another respect. Hope you all had a great week. It's been a, a wonderfully interesting and busy week. And I want to thank all of you who tuned in to watch uh, senior moment here, to watch the America tour that we just got finished with. I'm sorry, folks, that I forgot the name of the tour. I spent the whole weekend doing that, but I appreciate the fact that you supported the cause, and so do the people who put it together. So it's been a very, very interesting news week in a whole bunch of ways. And I know we've sat and discussed fake news media before, and you've heard me rant and rave about it, and I've brought different people on to speak about it, but I've never had this gentleman on to speak about it before. And you all know how I feel about journalistic integrity. And journalistic integrity means, that you do what a journalist is supposed to do, and you ascertain the facts of a story and you put them out there and let the audience determine what's right and what's wrong. And this is a guy whose entire career centers around putting the facts out there, because everything he puts out has paperwork to prove it, all in black and white. So without further ado, let me bring on my good friend here, Mr. Derek Johnson. How you doing, Derek?
Oh, I'm doing all right, especially after this week.
Been
Yeah.
very, very interesting, hasn't it been?
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't ever want to be like braggadocious, but then again, there's moments where you kind of have to be like, when you know you're a good person, you got a good heart. Only you and your family or your friends know that. But when something finally happens or something happens that you've been talking about the whole time, uh, there's nothing to fear, stuff like that. When something happens, you're like, hey, another validation point. But we're on the journey. It's not a destination, right?
And that's the
So
whole
I'm doing
key.
all
It
right.
is a journey. We know what the destination is. Very few people have learned to enjoy the journey. And boy, has this journey been really interesting. The whole entire journey, but this past week just really ramped it up to a whole different level. And just in watching it, and I broached this subject, we'll start out with this because to me, it's just the funniest part of the whole thing. We're always talking about the fact there's no doubt that this is a military operation. There's no doubt about the fact this is a movie. There's no doubt about the fact that what we're watching now isn't for our edification. This is to wake up the normies and put the stuff out there. All of this has happened already. And maybe I'm one of the few, not just because we're in the know, but because of what I did for my entire life, that I noticed these things. But when they showed the video earlier in the week of the Israeli strikes on Iran's facilities, on their planes, on their mobile rocket launchers, on bunkers, and this and that and the other. And the first thing I noticed was, here come these missiles. Especially the most obvious one was a seated F-16, and that missile hit it dead center. You couldn't miss it. And then the smoke cleared, and the thing's still sitting there, intact. Now we know that's not going to happen. So it's been very, very interesting putting out there, even though we have control of the fake news, it's interesting to watch the fact that they put the stuff out and still the normies don't see it.
Oh, you want me to comment? I thought you were going to keep going. Well, yeah, I mean, it was kind of you and I were talking about this other evening. We were just sitting there chatting about doing this. But it's like the Globemaster. Like there's certain things like where if you ever get an opportunity to be around whatever it is that you've been shown, like like you would be in admiration of something. But like the Globemasters, it's not our biggest aircraft. We have the C5 Galaxy, but the Globemaster is a big aircraft, And when they showed the aircraft with the Afghanistan, see what people do is what people do, and you and I both know this. It's set up to it's either distraction for somebody, or it's the proclamation timestamp in another kind of manner, depending on what it is, what they're showing you. Right. Well, that wouldn't be a proclamation timestamp because it's not real. All right. So it becomes a distraction. And then you got to know, well, why is that? Well, it's called special operations, ladies and gentlemen. It's a special operation, meaning it's clandestine, covert till we want you to know about it. And that's what happened with Iran. This has already been pre-planned. Iran's already been dealt with. You're seeing the disclosure part now. That's going to set up the exoneration, set up the stage of what President Trump did the whole thing for. This is just a piece of it. Well, the Afghanistan thing, what did it do? People like you and I, or whoever it was that were saying, hey, that wasn't a real aircraft. Are you serious right now? That's a blow up. They use these things. And then they even gave disclosure with the whole Ukraine, Russia. There were mainstream articles talking about blow up tanks, that they're using blow up tanks. Like blow up, ladies and gentlemen, not like blown up, like the definition of blowing something up, but like an inflatable object. All right, that looks like it. So now, that wasn't a strategic plan either to go, oh, we're going to get Russia to blow up these inflatable tanks and waste their ammo. No, it wasn't that. They're showing you that this is all theater, every aspect. So the Afghanistan thing, what did it do? Oh, well, 13 people died, 13 soldiers. They got everybody's heartstrings with the death. Health and death are two things that are hard to prove unless you have absolute everything else. Well, we have absolute everything else. We have all the laws and orders. We have the continuity of government, the military occupation. All those are tactics. All right. Then you got to have the laws that back it. So they get people all attached on like death and health. And then they want to do what? Fight and argue over that. When I'm like, look, I said, if it was real, we could talk realness here. And I would be talking, but we have all this operation here that can show you what that was. All right. If it was real, then we'd have the evidence to show that it was real. There's no evidence to show that it's real. There's none. Right? So it's like a Globemaster, the aircraft they showed for the Afghanistan pullout. They got all these people swarming it while it's supposed to be running down the airway. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've ever seen a Globemaster, you can go to sometimes you'd have to catch it at the right moment, but Camp Shelby over in Mississippi, and the Globemasters, they train there, all right, airborne. Those bad boys, they are so big, but they'll get right down over the road. And I mean, as big as they are, they can move. And that's a lot airborne goes out of that. And so, there's a lot of things a Globemaster does, but a Globemaster that big, they wouldn't be hanging on to the any aspect of the aircraft, no matter it's the front, the back, the belly, wherever. They won't be hanging on to that thing. It would have plowed them over or sucked them in those big old engines, little things like that. And
that was the point I was going to bring up. Was let's face it, whether it was a Globemaster or not, any plane with engines that size, as they're taxiing and they start to power up the engines to take off, what's going to happen if you're in front of those engines? Exactly. They'll suck up.
And they even talk about regular aircraft that it's not uncommon. It's rare, but it's not too rare. But certain birds will fly into the engine and it'll take the engine out. Yep. Right. Now that's why, thank God, it could scare people, but that's why a lot of aircraft, even with two engines, it could fly on one engine perfectly fine. I guess if you watch one get taken out by a bird, though, you'd be like, oh, please God, don't let another bird get the other one. But I mean, the odds of that. But even then, certain aircraft can glide. I mean, it's not, you'd be gliding a lot faster now, but they can still control it. So there's things like that. But I just look at the aspect of what we're talking about here, like what's fake, what's real, but also the emotions. You got to control your emotions during this stuff, right? It's just like with anything else. You have to always be in control of your emotions. I can't control your emotions. I can help you, but if you don't listen, and you don't want to listen to the people who know, then you might always be in a state of mind of depression or confusion or sad or angry or whatever it is. And but that's why there's experts, and that's why there's people who do know or have been put in their positions to help you out. And it's up to you to listen to that. And then again, it's like I've shown people the whole time, look, I'm subject to be wrong about something because I'm human. But also, why did I come out of nowhere? When people first go, where did this guy come from? Well, you might just be put here by somebody, right? You just never know. But what you do with that is go, okay, arm's distance. You don't jump right in the lap with someone and just go, oh, this guy liked me. Where's the cowboy hat? What? No, you say, what's he talking about? What's he provided me? Information? Is it talk? Is it just opinions? Or is there something that you can go look up? And so, it's like I do know that God gave me the ability to retain a lot of information. And I'm just using it for that right source and the right reason. But that's also about what you're talking about earlier about journalism. I've told everybody, you can hate me, loathe me. It's not about me. Some people make it about me. When I say you can hate me, loathe me, whatever. Laws and orders are still there. Everything that's in place right now is still there. I've had people want to fist fight. They want to fight. Meet me here. I'm like, okay. If I meet you, though, I may have just a little bit more in me that I might just whoop your rear end. But if you whoop me, the laws and orders are still there. So it don't change a thing, right? So that's why it is very key right now in this moment that people do take control of their emotions and learn that what is happening right now, President Trump said over and over, it's a great awakening, right? So with a great awakening, that means we're moving to a new direction, a new light, a new destination, a new journey, everything, and we're leaving the past behind. Well, why would you want to follow people that replicate the swamp, right? Fake news, what we're talking about. So you're learning to separate the wheat and the chaff. Communication, as you and I know, there's one key component of communication. Listening, And then
I gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth.
That's it. And then we, once you know what the commander's working with, it's real simple. When you hear people say that's unconstitutional, well, it's real simple. You got to know the laws and orders to be able to talk about what's constitutional and what's not. And so that's why you got to know. You got to listen to the commander-in-chief. And then if you thought that the commander-in-chief was operating with something, then you go to the laws and read the law and see what it says, and then you go, okay, that is actually constitutional. And there's a prime example. I mean, there could be something right now that not right now, but there could be something that's on the law books that's not being used yet that wouldn't be needed right now. We'll just say there's something there that's not really lawful, but if it was needed to back out something. So that's what President Trump did. He took all of the swamps, tactics, the rhetorics. He took everything. He took the terminology of the corporation, and he goes, okay, you limited me in 1973 with the War Powers Act by having to use national emergencies. All right, I'll declare those. I'll use the reserve components, and they're using this. They're using the corporation's language against them. Right now, the corporation. Now they are. You got Schumer today saying that he has no strategy with Iran and erratic threats, and you got other congressmen. He just called out one of the Republicans. President Trump just posted this today, calling out one of the Republicans. He said he's not MAGA, and he needs to be voted out. Well, what they're doing is still draining the swamp, and they're showing you too that hey, there's people who talk a lot. They don't have a clue what's going on lawfully, or they're preying on your emotions. They're preying on your feeling. But this is still under the continuity of government. So that's all strategic. But it's showing people that, hey, this was all a strategic plan. It's draining the swamp. And, when you chanted drain that swamp or the best is yet to come, follow the money and all the terms of predators, you're watching that. This is exactly what you're watching right now. And so that little thing, even though I know we're still in an operation, we're still in the continuity of government. The law shows that it's partially revoked. But little things like that, when President Trump tells you, then you got to listen to President Trump, and then you got to know, okay, what is constitutional, what isn't, and then know how law works and how it does it. But let's say there was a law there that he had to use let's say it was unlawful. Well, if it's still on the paper, who deems it unlawful? The courts do. They haven't done that. So President Trump, if this was real time, it's not, but even this shows people, if it was real time, all President Trump would have to do is this. Well, if it's unconstitutional, why is it still in the law books? If you don't want me to use it, why is it still in the law books? How come the judges haven't deemed this unconstitutional? All the laws he's used have been in laws forever. The orders are new. The laws have been there. So see, that's where people got to separate that. And, we're truly going through a great awakening. We're going through a renewal, a respirit, but also a resetting of the fundamentals. It's not a changing of the fundamentals. It's a resetting of that. And, the Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, that's what everybody's witnessing. And the only way you know that is to know that. And we've got to get that. And we are, and this, 1776 commission that President Trump put out way back, that they did this on purpose. They made Biden in a visual, even though I know he wasn't real with people. They made Biden revoke that because it's an actual teaching of Martin Luther King Jr. It's teaching our history. Why would you want anybody to revoke a documentation that's going to put history back in schools? They did that on purpose for people who actually knew about the 1776 commission. Not many people, but the ones that did. Why would you, if Biden was real, you should be saying, why would you revoke something that's going to put our history back in our schools? It's going to teach people about Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, George Washington Carver. Let's go with all the stuff that's not white people, right? Let's just talk about it. That's what they were doing. So see, they showed that. How many people knew about that? Not many, except for people who were following President Trump. But it was still all part of an operation to show you that why would you want this abolished? And it's also a timestamp, though, to show that. And when they do exonerate President Trump, all these things will be shown. And it'll go into that exoneration process where it's like, hey, for the people who thought Biden was real, why would you revoke this? So we're going to put education back in our schools, and we got to get it back in there to where it's like teaching kids. Look, I love algebra. I was good at it. I'm good at calculus and Cal 4. I went all the way up, but back when I was in college, you could substitute anything calculus for computer. So I can actually prove that I'm not a computer guy. Just by that alone, I have no computer, technology. I'm not that person, but I was great at calculus, but I have never used calculus in my life ever, unless that's what exercised my brain to let me hold all this information. Maybe that's it. But other than that, I've never used that. And there's certain things that we have put into schools that kids don't need whatsoever. And so that's what we got to do. Terminology, listening skills, writing skills. The only reason you and I know what we know, and I'm not trying to speak on your behalf all the time, but I know this for a fact. The only reason you and I know what I know is because my grandfathers and grandmothers, they wrote letters to each other, right? And then also our presidents wrote diaries, kept diaries, a personal diary, on top of presidential, wrote their own, handwritten, right? And then historians have written down, put them in books, and thank God a lot of those books have survived. I have one right here. It's dated like 1787. And I have a series of books right here near me that are all from the 1800s that outline certain laws, certain things that took place. Someone had to handwrite those and then put them in print. And that's why we have what we have, and it can't be argued. So now we got to go back down to what? Ideology. And the whole reason you and I are here having this conversation is what our founders established. That's you hear liberals, the First Amendment, the Constitution. That's the only two words they know. They don't know anything else. I'm like, yeah, well, you're forgetting a little thing. The Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, the Bill of Rights, but also Thomas Paine's Common Sense. There's a lot of, look at what President Trump says, well, the Common Sense Party, and Thomas Paine way back in the foundation wrote a common sense piece. They forget about all that.
Well, the funny part about it is and especially what we've gone through the past bunch of decades. The mainstream media has brainwashed a lot of people, and the agenda that they pushed forward was basically the idea of relying on them to be believed, and people not wanting to go and do the work themselves, not wanting to research themselves. And like I said in the open, you bring facts and receipts to the table. You've got everything there. You're presenting everything factually, you're presenting everything in black and white, but people can't be bothered going to check the stuff out. So when you get to the point, and a lot of what they're trying to do, and you mentioned it before, using the white hats using the cabal's own game against them. It's the same thing with brainwashing. How do you unbrainwash people? Wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. Same stuff, but the right stuff. But when you go back and you look at the not just American people, but people globally who have become so complacent and so relying on others to do things for them rather than doing it themselves. And that's more than anything, I guess, why General Flynn made the statement, local action, national impact, and that you need the citizen journalists and you need the people to go out there and learn. But we've also seen that a lot of what's on quote unquote alternative media is also fake and false, because a lot of people still go to the belief that, better to be first than right. But that's not the case. So people have to, and we've used this phrase since we started doing this, they have to learn to discern. But they have to put the effort in to do it. And the question is, and it's always been my question from the time I started this, how do you change human nature? How do you give them that kick in the ass to get moving and do it?
Well, it's like Roosevelt said, you got to speak softly and carry a big stick, and I mean, it goes back to discipline, really, because my dad was a disciplinarian. He never abused me. He never hit me or abused me. He was a disciplinary, though. And people, there's your terminology again. There's a huge difference in discipline and abuse, right? He said, here's my rules. When you're living under my household, especially when I got high school, right? Here's my rules, all right? You come home with a tattoo, it's coming off. It will come off. I don't know how I'm going to get it off, but it's going to come off. Well, we were in a barn one day. I lived on it was right at a 5,000 acre cattle ranch. And so we were out in the barn one day and he had an old rust iron, and he was just like what a grandpa, my grandpa used to have all these little analogies and then, little stories and stuff. And my dad was sitting there working on this. I don't even remember what it was, but it seemed like it was some kind of a bush hog blade or something, but it had rust on it. And he was like, you see this rust? This rust has been on here quite a while, and it takes time to set up and develop. He said, you see this right here? Watch this. Gone. He's like, come home with a tattoo. And he had that rust iron. He said, come home with a tattoo. Try me. All right. Now I wasn't having I had no, in high school, I wasn't even talking about tattoo. I don't even know. I mean, he was already setting the standard of if you do ask, and little things like that, and I didn't drink, didn't party, nothing like that in high school. I remember one time I got at a party, got caught. I didn't know that's where they were taking us. We were 16, something like that. And got there and realized what it was. And I slipped out. I walked about 2 miles up the road in the woods. I had that old Nokia cell phone. So and you didn't ever, people forget, kids didn't have, the phone wasn't turned on. It was always off until you wanted to use it. And so I had to turn it on and walk till it gave me a bar. It would not call. So I had to walk 2 miles to get a signal. And I called my dad. I was in the woods, and I said, yeah, I'm on County Road this. And, I said, where that such and such is and that? And he was like, I said, just in case, because they were riding back and forth trying to find me. The kids were, because they were going to haze you then. Oh, you don't want to party, and all that. So my dad hit me up, and he was like, that's when the fist bump. I already knew about the fist bump long before the fist bump was really popular, because this was back in the 90s, and fist bumps, and he was like, you did the right thing. And I was 16 years old. When I first got my driver's license, my mom and dad let me drive by myself to see all my family in Oklahoma. I mean, that's how disciplined I was at 16 years old, right? It didn't even have GPS. This was before GPS, right? You had the old Ram McNally, the big maps, you had to follow so I was 16 years old, had just turned it, all right? But I was already driving tractors by the time I was 8, 9 years old, right? This is just stuff in the South, that's the Southern jokes, but I mean, a tractor, we have two pedals on one side, 2 on the other, right? You have 2 brakes, and then you have all the levers and things like that. You learn this stuff early, so that's why your brain can do multiple things. But my dad was a disciplinarian, and he expected, certain things that was expected of him, right? And it didn't hurt anybody. And so, like, I had to pull a 5 acres now of corn by the ear, by hand. Right, my dad was teaching me what he went through, and to whenever I got to play Nintendo or whatever it was, the whatever time frame they let me play it with the discipline, I appreciated that time, because I remember going out to the doggone 5-acre field and have 5-gallon buckets pulling ears of corn and filling up the back of a Chevrolet pickup, baling hay, square bales, etc. You were just talking about how hot and everything is and all the humidity. I mean, you think about that. We do that all the time in the South, and it's always during August. It's always during the worst time of the year. It's always hot. Your allergies are all messed up. But when you get done with that, you appreciate a glass of lemonade. All right, that's all you. Even just something that simple. So discipline. A lot of people don't have discipline, and a lot of people now actually grew up the same way I did, but they got away from it. Right, because you got comforted in what we have, and some of it's rightfully so, spoiled, right? But the other parts is like what you're seeing when people don't want to break away, like we're talking about, right? When you have evidence, and I'm like, I have evidence of you whining, complaining, and fussing, and you say you want to know, but then when we try to show you, you can't break away from it, right? And you are a product of that, and a lot of people don't realize, they'll say the same thing. We got people our age and older saying, oh, these children, and they're always on their phones. I'm like, you're glued to the TV. You're the same thing. You're the same product. You're glued to Fox. You're glued to whatever it is. You're glued to that. And what I've been explaining to people about, like, Fox News, right? I know President Trump promotes OAN and Newsmax. Well, he promotes them because they're better than Fox, right? But still, what these people do, it's like my grandma. She was a heck of a cook, and she could make anything. And I love being around grandma when she was making a cake or something, because I was the only grandchild on one side, but I was also the spoiled grandchild on the other side too. My other grandmother still spoiled me too. So I was like the little spoiled one, right? And they'd be making their cake, and then they'd hand you the device that mixed the cake batter or whatever. And they get you want to lit the spoon? Oh, yeah, let me have that. Right. And so you get the lit spoon. Well, what Fox and OAN and Newsmax and a lot of these others who are just regurgitating what they're doing, what they do is they give you the spoon, but they never give you the rest of the cake. Right. They just go, oh, 1 lick. That's it. That's all you get. You're done. Right. They don't show you they don't talk about laws. They don't talk about orders. They don't talk about any of that. They don't even talk about the bills and the acts. They don't even talk about that. Right? They'll surface it if they do. And so then what do people do? The people watching that, they don't go research that part. That's what I've been doing my whole life. Right? And though also what's cool about this time period though is I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a congressman or woman. I'm not a high-ranking military retiree. So, so it's also showing you too that all the people who got stuck on what? Titles, positions, ranks, entitlement. And before 1871, if I went and said, hey, I want to be a lawyer, All you had to do was go find another lawyer, and he would say, all right, he or she, read these books. And you read them. If you comprehended the language, the glossary, the index, the terminology, and how they are applicable, right? Not just the terminology, but how you make it applicable, then you can do what? Oh, man, you need to study law with me or open up your own. It's all books. It's all a practice, right? And what happened was the people, it only took one generation, Mark, one. What you were talking about earlier, see, we're talking about, it only took one generation to start the cylinder of the brainwashing. And it was right after the Great New Deal with FDR. We had this spirit in America like nobody's business. The greatest generation just got finished doing what they did. They started all these New Deal programs where people started putting money here, putting money here, putting money there, putting this here, Social Security this and this, that, and other, right? And those people were innocent. And they believed in the people that they thought was appointed over them, the representatives. And it took that one generation to start this cycle. And it after Eisenhower in his military industrial speech, and then what happened with JFK. And all these people, same thing with country music. And I know people think that's the most far-fetched thing to pull in. It's not. When we go around, when I was on Billboard, right, I have an independent team. They were former major record label executives. But what happens is whenever you call with an artist to radio knows what? All your major record labels. And they only answer to them first. Why? Because that's what was established way back here when they established it in the 40s. And it's that cycle. And all those radio people stay in that cycle. They don't have to. There's nothing constraining them that says they can't pick up the phone and go, hey, you're who again? And you got this artist? And boom, let me listen to him. Oh, man, this is great music. Or she or whoever. Nope. All they do is pick up, if it's not of the major five, which now they call it, used to call it Power Five, but now it's about 7 of them. If it's not in that immediate Power 7, it takes all kinds of money to buy your way into that under the table, which is what we did and basically beat the system. And so it's the same cycle, though. All these people tie in. All those major record labels tie in all to your CBS, ABC, all these things. Same thing with The Voice, American Idol. They're all syndicated audiences, ladies and gentlemen. They have you captured. You're already captured. All the stuff, the tryouts, all that stuff they show you. It's not, all that is word of mouth advertising. It's free marketing because all these people are going to go, hey, I tried out for American Idol. You got to watch and see if I make it. Those are all your gullible people. The ones who actually make it on the show already had direct ends. I got contacted just about 3 or 4 months ago from another TV show that wanted me to apply to it. One of the producers. And I'm like, no, thank you. All right. I already know how that works. I also went through another one like 6 years ago. They send you a packet that thick of you got to get an attorney if you don't know how to read it, but you got to get an attorney to read it if you can't read it. It's that thick of the stuff you just have to read through and sign just to be on a TV show. All right. And that was another former major record label executive who had said, hey, I can get you on the show if you want to be a part of this. The show never got picked up by Fox, but it was, you can Google about it. I have to go back and read which one it was. I know all the stuff, right? And so it's all syndicated. It's closed caption. They already have a captured audience, right? So the winners. So it's like all these people right now with Beyonce. Oh, Morgan Wallen should have won. Luke Combs should have won or something. They're all in the same system. They already know that. And the more you bicker over here, you're only raising the other one up. And the more you bicker about this one, you're raising the others up. They're in the same system. You're captured. You're all captured. And so what we're trying to say is that, look, you don't have to be captured. And what President Trump and them are doing, country music's not like the big topic right now, right? It's Iran, a lot better, like nuclear weapons, right? It's like country music, no, So just making a point to people. So you got to take the higher precedent first and work your way down. All this stuff will be cleaned out. But like we're saying, you could have known about this a lot sooner than right now. You could have had more peace and solace and comfort back here than what you do right now. You could have already had that. And so it's all part of this, like it's a control system. All right. And it was on purpose to get you focused on that. All right. And then, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, or oh, that's hogwash, or that's bullcrap. Right. Well, what is a conspiracy theory? Then you got to go to that. You got to be like questionable, like me. I've always been in my life. You got to go, oh, what is that? Well, what would that be? And so, what President Trump's doing, like I tell people, he is a commander in chief. He has one role. Well, whenever someone's yelling this or yelling that, then you got to know what his role is in order to be able to do what? Debunk it or authenticate it. And so that's, kind of what we've been talking about. But it's very important that people do know that. And you have control of that. It's like when you're dating someone, like if they're cheating on you or they're doing whatever it is that goes against your principles or your establishment, you don't keep them in your life. I mean, you shouldn't. Some people do, I guess, but like a lot of people end up breaking up and they go, well, what'd you break up for? Well, because they cheated on me. Yeah, well, you control that. So why would you let media control your emotions and your feelings? Why would you want that? I guess is what I go back to, when you don't have to.
Well, but see, you touched on a very, very, very important point before. When you're talking about your family and your dad, and one of 4 things that have been completely and totally lost over the past couple of decades, very, very important things that have been lost, are manners, decency, respect, and most of all, responsibility. People don't want to be responsible for anything. That's why all these jackass attorneys can have billboards on every highway and on every street, and they can advertise all over TV. And if you've ever watched, because I dealt with Lord knows how many of them throughout my career, they're not interested in going to court. They're interested in getting you to sign up and getting a settlement from the insurance company or from the other party. That's all they're interested in doing. I think if these guys ever had to go to court, they wouldn't be able to make a penny. They'd lose every time, but they look for the settlement. And they especially love to get in front of the cameras because the newsrooms will always put them on camera because it makes for a good story. Oh, my client, was racially charged, or my client was wounded by the police, and all of these things, and they get these large settlements. We had that. I think the first salvo of that. No, it wasn't the first, because go back to Abner Louima and people like that. But Eric Garner in Staten Island with the chokehold. Anybody who sat down and watched that video, and it was shot at a million different angles. After that cop put the chokehold on him and brought him to the ground, nobody and nothing was around his neck. He died of an asthma attack. And yet the family ended up with a $5 million settlement, and the cop ended up in jail. And these are the things that lack of responsibility, not wanting to, and again, the media push this forward, pushing forward the agenda of, man, I'm having a rough time tonight. I was too busy this weekend. PC, being politically correct, that nobody wanted to open their mouths about anything. Because God forbid, I came forward as a white person and said, what the hell are you doing? First of all, the guy had 42 prior arrests for the same thing. But the big point of it was he put his hands on a police officer. Done deal. Game over. And when you look at the tape, nobody was around his neck. So again, that responsibility of the public, that $5 million came out of the pockets of everybody in the New York area. But nobody said boo. They'd all stand, we've got to fight for equal rights. No, responsibility. If he had not resisted, he would have gotten a desk appearance ticket. You know what that would have cost us? Nothing. But again, responsibility, and these are the things that the media pushes forward and has pushed forward. So again, we got to go and break that trend and get the people to have that responsibility, to break all of get back to the things that you and I learned as kids. And you and I are two totally different generations. But these are things that, because of where you grew up and because of when I grew up, these are things that were instilled in us and have been sorely lost in our society. And we've got to go and take the bull by the horns and try and do something about it. And the question is, when we sit and we look at the media, and you especially, where you're talking about the laws and orders and this and that and the other, and talking about the Constitution. And I had this discussion with both Sheriff Mack and Sheriff Bianco. They swear deputies in to the United States Constitution and to the state constitution. And more than half of these people that they're swearing in have never seen or read the Constitution. So they're swearing to something they know nothing about. Where's the responsibility there to learn, to go and, you said you get a thing that big from the TV producers to sign if they want to have you on the show. Constitution's not that big. Where is the responsibility to read that? You're doing your due diligence to read that and see what it is you're swearing to.
Well, another thing that you bring up too is this. My dad made me appreciate what I had, right? Because when you're training up a child in the way that he should go and he won't depart, like the Bible says, well, when your mom and dad have you, that's why they have diluted everything. They've diluted terms, respect, those words, all the responsibility, all the words have been diluted. When Johnny Cash had a song in 1971 called "What Is Truth," I mean, it should show you even then that was before my era, right? And Johnny Cash is writing a song about what is truth, and it talks about these different scenarios where it's like the kids think this and the kids think this was. I mean, it's not like it just started happening, right? So when you train up a child in the way that he should go, it still always goes back to discipline and structure from the household, the family first. And our generations, my mom and dad's generation and in your before didn't have this stuff, right? It was like this was not even like the topics. So when you go back, my grandfather, my dad's father, who was born in 1912, right? I mean, people used to say around him, I wish I lived in the old days. He said, no, you don't. You wouldn't have made it. Because he talked about growing up, no air conditioning, no inside plumbing, right? I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, people hear that today. A kid hears that today. A 15-year-old hears that today. That's 1800. No, that wasn't 1800s. That was the 1900s. It wasn't that long ago that we have evolved into what we have now, air conditioning and in-house plumbing and all these things, a washing machine. My dad tells me when he was, he remembers, so my grandfather was a cotton farmer, and they picked cotton by hand, just like everybody else did. And my dad said, I remember being, I can't remember how old he was, 12, 13. And see, they all played sports back then to get out of picking cotton. That was the way that they could justify it. So that's why one of my relatives, he told my dad, I'll never pick cotton again in my life, ever. I'll do everything I can to never pick cotton again, right? Because a lot of our families, they never left. They stayed in the farm, and that's okay. But he was like, not me. He was a first-round draft pick to the Dallas Cowboys. He was a 5-time All-Pro, Super Bowl champion. He started all 14 years of the Dallas Cowboys. He didn't pick cotton again, right? So, he made his promise and he kept it. And so, they all picked cotton back then. And my dad said, I remember when my grandfather, so his dad heard about a one-row cotton picker, one row. He was like, but it was such a marvel. But he's like, then it was so expensive. You had to look at this knowing that machine can pick cotton, but we can't afford it. We're going back to pick by hand, right? Now, one of my family members has a 24-row cotton picker, right? And so you just, and it's all machine, and you sit in the air condition. You can listen to music in the cab, closed in cab, everything, right? And you think of this was all in one century, right? It's so my dad, has all it's some cool stories, right? But it teaches you that respect, and that's what the military does. The military teaches you respecting your equipment, like the gas chamber. All the first 2 weeks before you go to the gas chamber, you have your gas mask in a little pouch on your side. They put everybody in a room, one room together. It's like 230 of you in a room. All right. And they make you all stand up. Now you have to be honest, right? But if you can't reach and get your mask out, put it on your head. It's got 1, 2, 3, 6 or 7 straps. You have to, and then you have to clear in, clear out, clear in again, right? In, out, in, right? All that in, I think it's 5 seconds. I believe it was 5. All right, this is out of your pouch, on your head, clear, 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 or you're dead. That's what they said the scenario was. All right, so and the first the first day, because you do this all day, lunch, come back to that all day. Well, if you're honest, you have to sit down, meaning you're dead. Sit down, and everybody sit. By the time we're done with that, but before we go to the real gas chamber, every single one of us, all 230, can have our mask on at the same time, in sequence, clear, unclear, clear. No one's dead in the room. That is teaching you respect of your equipment and also paying attention to detail, etc. Right? And listening. But then when you go into the gas chamber, then you're ready to go. Like you'll know what to do in the gas chamber. All right. Until they make everybody take your gas mask off anyway and experience the gas, right? And that is hell on earth. I can go ahead and tell you right now. But it teaches you respect, and that's what military does. A lot of people don't realize that. That's why you're always, when you first get into reception, long before basic training, we call them birth control glasses because everybody looks ugly. Everybody gets your head shaved, all right, except for the females, obviously, but all the heads are shaved, and you have these white, clear glasses on, right? They're just clear. And everybody looks like, dweebs walking around, right? I'll never forget all the guys that had long hair, and they did it on purpose. They had their long hippie hair, whatever, and they did it where they let it grow out where everybody could watch it. I mean, you're watching everybody, whoever in the room with, you watch everybody's hair just go, right off. They don't hesitate either, and you ain't getting photos of it, so there's that. All right, but little things like that, they teach you respect. The glasses come in because of shrapnel or something, a debris that flies up. Well, you got protective glasses on, but you get in such a habit of putting those on that when you don't have them on, you go, oh gosh, where's my protection? Right? So that's teaching you respecting your equipment. You respect your equipment. You respect your friend and your battle buddy's equipment. People don't even know stuff like that. But then we go to the actual word respect. It's an action. It's not a word. It's an action. All these people walking around, you disrespected me. Well, what were the actions that deemed that? If some people are being disrespected because of the way you are treating someone, it's a reciprocal act as well. Certain these words are reciprocal. They have to be reciprocated. All right. So if you're being disrespected, you might actually deserve it because you might not be reciprocating it. So there's a lot of things that people have done, and you see this all over social media. Females out there, it disrespected men, this, that, and other. And it's just all this, just these feelings and these things. And they've just watered down everything and discombobulated everything. And that it was all done on purpose, as we know. And so if you get back to the discipline and the structure of everything, and people raise up their children the right way from the get-go, it's the same thing with the Constitution. I said that today on my podcast I was doing. I said, look, if everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing from the front, then the president and the Congress will be cohesive. They will be exactly what our founders talked about, an equal balance of power when they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing in each position in which they're in. If you want to be a senator, you have a certain role you're doing. You want to be a representative, you have a certain role you're doing. If you're a president, vice, whatever, you have a certain lane that you're in. If you're supposed to do that. And what you and I've witnessed is the judicial branch and the lawyers, the bar, take over this nation. All right, the past 60 years. And they told the executive branch and the legislative branch what they were going to do. Our founders didn't establish that way. It was legislative first, write the law, executive, enforce the law, judicial, interpret the law. The legislative and executive are voted on by us, and then the judicial is where the president, on the will of the people, elects the judges that's going to do what? The laws that the people want, that the legislation passes, that the executive enforces. It's that simple. And we haven't witnessed any of that because people did what? Started putting on, and it took one generation to do it. And it just started this cycle of laziness. Some of it spoiled, some of it on purpose. But it put all this entitlement, and I've heard it my whole life. I know you have. I've heard people say, well, you're passionate about this, you do it. And I'm like, that's our problem right there. That's why we are where we are. It's because you want me to do it like you just were saying a while ago. It's the responsibility. You want me to bear the responsibility. You don't want it. And then you wonder, though, why you're bickering and fussing and complaining and whining and griping and moaning. And you're wondering, it's because that is our role. That is our responsibility. And the Declaration of Independence shows us that. That's what gives us our right to overthrow the government when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And when it comes a festering pot. And I love it because President Trump, he listens to so many people. He shows, too, he's not bigger than everybody either. Festering. He didn't use that word until I used that word. One of my managers one time, we were down there, and she said something about being emblematic. He had never used the word emblematic before that day. After that, in the speech the next night, he used the term emblematic. All right, the next speech, he was in Ohio. Why would you be in Ohio, right, talking about Alabama, right? I mean, it's just so he shows people, and he validates all over. And he just put a post up 3 days ago. He said, I see all patriots everywhere. I see what you're doing and how hard you're working, and things like that. So, if people would just get back to that just basic formula of life. And that's why sometimes special operations does do certain things to do what? Certain resistance gets your attention. So sometimes when you are getting mad, welcome to being part of the capture of the cleansing, right? And then we're not going to capture you the wrong way, but we got you captured in a minute of captivated. Now we're going to red pill you and show you what you've been brainwashed with all this time. So a lot of this stuff is actually planned, but it's a counter psyop, because that's what's been done to everybody. It was a psyop, right? They used the TV. They started twisting and manipulating all the language and the verbiage of the laws and the orders and got everybody all twisted and all this. And then now, President Trump, I know people don't realize it. He don't sound like he speaks softly in another manner, but he's done more with the stick than he has with the proclamations. So you have to look at it that way. And so, that's what everybody's been witnessing.
Well, see, that's where I always go back to this point of editorialism, because when a journalist speaks or an anchor speaks, you are never supposed to know what side they're leaning to. They're just supposed to deliver the facts. And it's because of what has been allowed in the business that we've ended up where we are. And then it was only exacerbated by our good buddy Bathhouse Barry there going and updating the Smith-Mundt Act. Basically telling everybody, yes, you can put out propaganda. Now, they're already lying to you. And now you're almost like an executive order. We're giving you permission to lie to the public, to meet an agenda. And that only exacerbated the problem because you already had people being pre-woke. And then they just completed the task. Now, it's my opinion, and again, just an opinion, and I usually don't give opinions, but it's my opinion that what's been going on as far as the psyop that we're living in and Trump's involvement and the counterintelligence and everything started back in 2011, 2012. Because in spite of the fact that he made his reveal in 2015, a lot of the stuff, and it's possible that he got involved a decade or two before that, because there were things that he came out with even during 9/11 and prior to that. And we know how close he was with Kennedy Jr., Princess Diana, et cetera, et cetera. But when you look at the involvement and the push that was really made on the media from that point, from the change of the Smith-Mundt Act to what we're living through now, where we went from gay rights to just an absolute free-for-all freak show.
Yeah.
And this was all, it was a program by the media, set by the government to destroy the values and everything else in the country, and then put forth by the media, because where else are you going to get your mass appeal? So a lot of this stuff was pushed forward. That agenda was pushed forward and thrown in our faces. And now they're trying, even though that was the beginning of trying to turn it around, you had to make people see how ridiculous it was to begin with before you could start unbrainwashing them. Correct?
Well, that's right. And President Trump, that's why he got beat up for saying about he's talking about the countries, and they said they were a bunch of, look like shit, and he was talking about they've all gone to shit. And the media was like, oh, you're calling these countries that are poverty, you're making fun of these people. And I'm like, it's your democratic people who keep them in poverty, right? Because I put that's why part 2 of my book is so thick, but I go heavy in the special operations, real heavy. But then also I hammer Bill Gates and all that crew, because it's like you have 3 fundamentals in life, 3 fundamentals that you need. You need food, water, shelter. That's it. This shirt, my buckles, this hat, this watch, everything's a bonus. Like if you have a boat, if you have an ATV, whatever, like if you can go fishing, if you can go hunting, if you can go hiking, if you go golfing, that's a bonus. You don't need those things. Those are bonuses. So everybody that's been bickering, whining, fussing, you're already in the bonus realm. Like you live a bonus life, right? The only people who really don't and could be fussing are homeless people, depending on their choices. But still, the people who have really gone to rock bottom and all right, not picking on them, they're the ones that could be whining, bickering, and fussing, not you. Every single person watching, you're in a bonus realm of your life. You have food, water, shelter. You may not have the food and water, shelter you want, but you got it, right? So I know people who are billionaires, and you would never know it, like the way they live and what they wear and what they dress and what they drive. They don't even drive like a billionaire. They don't even look like a billionaire, right? But they don't base their material. It's not all material things. They know that they're lucky or blessed or whatever, or both, a little bit of both. But, when you look at that, food, water, shelter, that's the 3 components you need, right? And what was Bill Gates and them doing? They raised on one little thing, they raised $400 billion. $400 billion. You know what they did with that $400 billion? They created a vaccine, ladies and gentlemen. You can take $400 billion and go into most third world countries that still exist right now and go clean up their water, clean up their poverty level. So President Trump tells you what? Everything had to go to shit before what? Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned the Smith-Mundt Act, because it's very, very important that people know the year of that. 1948 is when it was passed. But it was passed to do what? Prevent that. Prevent propaganda. Look at the year, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's very strategic to think about it. It was the year before NATO was established. All right. We go into Korea in 1950. Then 1955, you have Vietnam start up. You had 1961, the Eisenhower speech at the military-industrial complex. 1963 in January, JFK goes around the what? He goes around the Federal Reserve straight to the Treasury. The cabal, the deep state, did not like that. All right. And no matter what your opinion is on November 63, whether that was witness protect. Doesn't matter what the normals think. You got to go with what the normies think, that he was assassinated. No matter what you think. All right, go to that. Then you had Lyndon Johnson step in, right? Then Vietnam really cranked up. Then you had the unified budget at 68. We left the gold standard. 1971, we had the Nixon shot. That's when the Congress made the dollar as valuable as they wanted it, invaluable. We call that a little thing called inflation, all right, and deflation, depending on where you are and what they're doing with it. They started this. They started a tax for a tax for a tax, and this tax has a tax with it. They started that because they were incompetent idiots, like President Trump said. They're incompetent. They didn't know how to create wealth, but they were hijacking the people, hijacking our money, our system. But guess what? The same people we're talking about that don't know responsibility, don't want to take responsibility, you just let these people take it and take it and take it and take it. And then President Trump said what? It had to go to shit. Well, look at the 1948 and then look at what it was reversed, like you said, 2012. All right. So look at all what took place just from 2012 to President Trump taking over. All right. A lot can happen in 4 years, and it did. So you got to look at that. But then you also have to go, okay, the military occupation, military operation, and it don't mean that there's not going to be actions taken. That's just the parameter, and it's a unique setup. All right, but you still need the people to what? Get involved, get chimed in, know what's going on, know your responsibility. Same thing we're sitting about, accountability and responsibility. If there's 2 words you learn in the military, those are 2, and the F word. But my mom and different people don't like that. But those are 3 words right there. But responsibility and accountability. Responsibility, accountability. You hear it over and over and over and over. All right. Now you do have commanders that go awry. You have NCOs that go awry, no doubt. But for the most part, there's always been those that hold and toe the line. That's like President Trump talks about Raising Cain, Dan Cain, and all the others. There's some who do, some who don't. And it's like the old saying, get the hell out of my way if you don't. Lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. That's the old saying. All right. And you can push them out of the way because what's going to happen is when you lead a revolution like's been going on, then people are going to want to be a part of something good because they see the strong and the strength. And President Trump says, peace through strength. Speak softly, carry a big stick. So when people see that and apply that sometimes resistance, sometimes when people are getting mad, well, it depends on what the subject was. Well, it depends on what they put out there. All right. And then it got people's what? Attention. If it got you mad, you may have needed to get mad because it may have led you to what the answer is. But then God has put on a whole new set of journalists at this time period in life. I mean, that's why, like people like me come on the scene and different. I'm not the only one, but I'm just saying that's why there's a new revolution. There's a new wave of people who are going to lead into the future. And it's like teaching people that discernment of how do you separate the wheat and the chaff, but it's consistency, right? It's if you're doing what's right from the start, like my dad always said, and my grandfather's taught it. Well, my dad always told me, he said, son, it's just simple. If you're somewhere and you stay there and or you're involved in something that makes you look guilty and you had the opportunity to leave or do the right thing and you didn't, don't waste your phone call on me. Call your mama or call your grandma. My dad and my grandpa felt the same way. Don't waste your phone call on me. Because if you waste it on me and I can tell the difference, he said, I'll be able to tell. Then you just wasted your phone call and you're going to sit your little happy butt in jail if you ever go to jail. So don't waste it on me. Well, see, I learned to do what was right from the start, from the beginning. And it's like you said, if you do what's right from the start, from the beginning, you won't ever have to worry about remembering something or telling another story, whatever it is, because you'll have everything consistent with your foundation. And see, a lot of people don't operate like that, like we're just talking about. They don't have that foundation. They don't operate like that. And guess what? You don't even have to be great. You don't have to be raised like that. You can pick up from today and apply that in your life and never be raised like I was to do that. All you got to do is have a foundation and operate on that foundation. All right. And it's like the same thing with President Trump. Laws and orders. They're not his. They're his orders, but they're not his laws. Right. And it's like all he'd have to say in real time is like, well, why'd you all leave these on the law books if they're unconstitutional? All right. So it's that simple. And people just don't have that foundation, but you can have that foundation. But that Smith Mundt is I talked about it the other day somewhere. I can't remember where we were talking about it. But their timeline is perfect. It makes sense. And President Trump did say on Inauguration Day, I went back and found it. I have to try to post it, but I found it where he said I had been asked to do this in 2000, right around 2015, but he said really though about 20 years. Well, if you do 20 on the 2025 minus 20, it's 2005. It would have been perfect timing for what he was saying about 9/11 and everything. So he tells people. The other thing, I just happen to have it here because I had it in my other podcast. It's this right here.
Yep.
All right. This is my Special Operations Command ball cap, but if you flip it around and look at it that way, ladies and gentlemen, well, when you see President Trump on TV, he's always doing this in every meeting and every event, whatever it is. And he couldn't do it on January the 20th, but Eric was over there awkwardly with his hands up doing it because it would have looked really weird for President Trump to do that on the day of inauguration. So he's telling you it's all a special operation. That's not Illuminati, and that is not Space Force. That's your United States Special Operations Command, Special Operations, unconventional warfare. But that whole key thing, when he was meeting with Diddy, what was his hand formations? All these liberals out there spewing, oh, he's a pedophile and he's a this. He's sitting there with a special. He show you he's been a part of this a long time. And he was best friends with JFK Jr. and he was good friends with Princess Di. And how do you shock the world, right? How do you get the world? And you and I, we've talked about it on other shows and other people, we've talked about this. I'll tell people it's not going to be doomsday. It's not going to be, because doomsday type rhetoric would have been the past, starting the wars and an actual war, not an operation. Iran was not a war. It's an operation. All right. And people need to learn the difference in a war and an operation. All right. And so when you do that, you think about it, it's not going to be doomsday. It's going to be something that's just like, like everybody's going to be like, what the heck did I just witness? And it's going to be cohesive. And it's going to be depending on who you are. If you're a patriot, you're going to be fine. You're going to be like, I told you. But you're supposed to do it in a loving way. It's supposed to be a loving, I told you so. And I'm going to have help that day too. I'm going to have to be like in a straitjacket myself, wanting to do the same thing. So I'm going to be the same way. But you're going to have to do something that knocks people off their feet. And I have a good inclination of what it'll be. But other than that, the words, the glossaries, the dictionaries, everything has to be back to the forefront. And President Trump's told you kind of what the future is going to look like. Any school that doesn't teach our history, they'll be defunded. Real simple. You're going to teach all this other rhetoric and all this other, you'll be defunded. You'll lose your money. And we all know what happens when money dries up. You either ship up or you shape out.
And this is a hard lesson for them all to learn. When you go back just a couple of weeks to all the crap that's been going on, and you look at basically the repeat of George Floyd. Now, you go back to George Floyd, and everybody, he killed this man in broad daylight, and he kept him on the ground for 45 minutes, and blah, 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 blah. But how many people sat down and watched the 6 hours of body cam video?
Exactly.
The cops who were there, who saw, after they finally got him in the car, that he threw himself out the other door into the street. And that's when he ended up on the ground. Well, now you fast, and, then the aftermath, of course, as they were burning down Minneapolis and a whole bunch of other places. Now you fast forward to 2 weeks ago. And again, you've got reporters out there. It's a mostly peaceful protest. Well, I'm sorry. When you're saying it's a mostly peaceful protest and the place is ablaze behind you, when you say it's a mostly peaceful process and you watch guys fleeing out of Target or the drugstore, this or that or the other, well, the funniest shot that I saw from the whole thing was guys who broke into, I guess it must have been like a Nike store or something like that in LA.
Oh, yeah.
and there's a
Yeah.
guy in a wheelchair with a stack of sneakers on his lap. You don't get much more comical than that. So, and yet they throw out the agenda that this is what it is. When for years, we've had homeless people, we've had veterans who served their country, who did their time, sleeping on the streets, not getting the medical help that they need. And people are supporting people who started their new lives in this country by breaking the law. There's a reason they're called illegal immigrants. And the key factor there isn't just the fact that they're illegal. It's not just the fact that they're also criminals that they're rounding up. But it's the simple fact that you and I, without our permission, are paying for this. And I don't see any of these people who are out there protesting against ICE taking any of these people into their homes. You know, you feel so strongly about it, take them into your homes. And yet, same thing from the media. They project that image that our government, in trying to do what is lawful, is doing the wrong thing and promoting these protests and promoting this civil disobedience.
Well, and you have the law, though, too. Here's the other thing with the law, bringing in the law. Here's your facts, all right? You're naturally going to have your tiny, tiny percentile people who always say, oh, well, we took the land from the Native Americans. All right, I'm Native American. I have Native American, can prove it, DNA, all right, in my family. So you're sitting here talking to someone who's got Native American, and also my family traces on the white portion of me, traces back to before the Mayflower here, all right? So, I mean, now, I'm not the only one, and I may be the only one talking like this, but it only takes one, right, to go, well, it's like there's gay people out there that support President Trump. Well, he can't be a homophobic if there's gay people who support President Trump. It's just like it's once you only need one to go, well, this is why I voted for him, this is why I don't think he is, and this is why I think this. You only need the one. But then the strength comes in numbers. I'm not the only one that believes like I do. All right, but also a Native American and also a lineage like my family has. So when you take that into consideration, President Trump and all of what he's doing, I just drew my blank on where I was going, but I had this great analogy. But what were we talking about? There's a lineage. I just drew a blank on what we were talking. I was thinking about. I had this great
We're talking about the immigrants and.
That's it. The immigration. So, you get the small. I don't know what the percent will be, but there's a percent out there who just keep hammering. They're liberals mainly, and they keep hammering about how we took the land from the Native Americans. Well, we conquered it though, and they didn't fight back. Even then, they didn't build their strength and numbers up to take it back. They did what? They went to a reservation and they bunkered down. And then they complained about it. They never took it back. Now, that could always be, but I can make that because I have Native American blood, that I could argue either side. All right. And that's fine. You can have an opinion on that. No one's not saying that. But what we're trying to say is that, okay, the Revolutionary War established a precedent. Everything we're living under right now is that precedent. It came from that. The Declaration, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, even the Articles of Confederation, everything. Fellow's paper. The whole reason we're here. So if you're going to be a liberal and use the word Constitution or First Amendment, which that seems to be the only two that they actually know, if you're going to do that, then your argument can't be, oh, we took the land from the Native Americans. Well, I'm a Native American, and if you're not, then my word trumps yours, all pun intended. And then also, if my First Amendment supports the foundation and yours doesn't, that trumps yours, all pun intended. That's how that works. All right. And then as Dan Scavino, people have to remember, Dan Scavino said specifically, don't let the 10% make you think they're the 90. They're not. All right. But also President Trump, remember, he landslided everything and popular vote. So that's why it looks atrocious that so many people jump ship. Not a lot, but it's not a massive percentage. But the ones who did on this Iran thing, you look atrocious. All right. Because you got hung up on a hiccup that was already pre-planned. But then you go back to the immigration topic. Well, one, we have laws, the asylum laws, right? If you're in Mexico, okay, well, you could flee to America. That is your next country over, right? So if you're in El Salvador, though, or Nicaragua, or Cuba, or Haiti, or wherever you are, and you're coming to America, but Haiti, this is what was so funny about Eagle Pass, Texas. So they said 2,000 Haitians were in Eagle Pass, Texas, trying to get across the border. Why didn't they float to Florida like they've been doing all these years? They went all the way across the Gulf of America. All right, if you want to be a smart aleck out there, anybody still out there listening that says Gulf of Mexico, whatever you want to say, they went across that this way west. All right, and then they would have had to go on another 800, 900 miles from the coast of Texas to Eagle Pass. That makes no sense whatsoever. Why didn't they float to Texas when they floated across this Gulf of America? Right? So that alone already shows you that's theater. But then if you're in El Salvador, your next country that you would seek asylum to ain't America. It's nowhere near it. And the asylum laws show this. And it's not just America that does this, right? If you're getting persecuted and you feel like that you got to flee your nation, you got to seek asylum in the country next to you. So there's that alone. But then we're not. I love what Mark Levine, and I'm gonna quote him what he said one time. He said specifically, he said, "I'm so sick of people saying we're a nation of immigrants." He said, "We're a nation of immigrants who became Americans."
Yep.
Right? If we have everything that our founders set up, it's just an ideology. It's on a piece of paper, an ideology that we have to keep going. How? With actions. It's all actions that we have everything. All these liberals that are, whether they call it rioting or protesting, whatever, even though riots are trash, but still, even if they were protesting, you're only as free as your surroundings allow you to be. You only have a First Amendment as long as your surroundings allow you to do that. It's funny, all the countries that do have kings, you don't see any protesting going on out there because the kings don't let them protest. Right? You're only protesting because you're in a nation that allows that. No matter how stupid you look, ignorant you look, don't know anything about it, we still let you get out there and look stupid. You don't have to, and I don't want you to look stupid, but we still let you do that. You're only as free as your surroundings allow you to be. But all these people out there, we're a nation of immigrants that became Americans who bought into our ideology. They bought into our way of life. Therefore, every Republican, conservative, patriot who's supposed to resemble that way of life, you really should know exactly how this nation functions and how it operates. And you don't want to be jumping ship when one little thing that was already pre-planned way back here in Laws and Orders shows so. All right. So that's why I was hammering this. It's been a fun week in a lot of ways. It's been disappointing in another for the fact that if you were in the command room, and you're looking down here and all these people are going, oh, I didn't vote for this and not our war or this. That's disappointing because it shows those people aren't reading what they can read. It's all public laws. It's all public information. But what we're just talking about, you got to have initiative. You know, I've been telling people over and over and over, knowledge is not power. It's the application of knowledge that's power, right? And so in order to apply something, you have to have the application, and then you got to make it applicable. And, President Trump is just like, he will be exonerated and all these other things, and he knew the beginning, he knew the middle, and he knew what the end would look like. But he'll have the last laugh, and everybody else in the world, bipartisan. And the other thing, too, even though we're not talking directly about this, but I hammered it again today, it was a Democratic House who introduced the war order. So a Democratic-controlled House introduced the war order under President Trump. So it is bipartisan. And, it's like, that's the part that when you're sitting back, you're just like, that's why people ask me, how are you so patient every week? Even though I'll rattle off sometimes, but I'm like, I'm like, because when you know what's in laws, and especially knowing that a Democratic House is the one who introduced the order.
Yep.
That's why, like, people who are actors and actresses, it's gonna be epic.
Well, that's all part of it. It's also it was under Carter that Iran became enemy number one, Democratic president. And it was also very, very funny. While they held those hostages for 444 days, Inauguration Day, 1981, as soon as Ronnie Reagan got into office, boom, they were out of there. So it's, all of these things are all portrayals. But when you come back to this whole scenario and what you were just talking about with what they're putting out there and the laws and orders, and what I had said before about, these sheriff's deputies and even a lot of sheriffs being sworn in, not knowing anything about the Constitution, we've seen in no uncertain terms over the past couple of weeks, and that's a white hat production, absolutely, how ignorant of the law most of the leaders in these cities, states, and federal government happen to be. And they very, very proudly and publicly come out and display that ignorance in front of everybody. But you have
and it's up to people, though. Remember that, and that's what I'm trying to tell people. You got to remember these people. If it's your community, your town, your city, your state, remember that. Unfollow them or vote them out, whatever it may be, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever it is, whether it's an influencer or a politician. You got to remember that. That's your log bank right here. You got to remember that stuff.
Well, but people, and you can go back to 9/11 for this, because I witnessed that in no uncertain terms. People really suffer in this country from bad short-term memory.
Yeah.
Because
I got a little.
No, but you look at New York after 9/11, and it was the most wonderful place to be. And everybody was so caring about their neighbor, et cetera, et cetera. And boy, on the 6-month day on the dot, everybody went back to being New Yorkers. And it's the same thing here. And I always refer to the George Carlin line, we got to vote all these politicians out. They all suck. They don't know what the hell they're doing. But my guy's doing a good job. And that's how a lot of people look at it. They don't go and consider their own because they don't want to be bothered.
Well, another thing too is I've been trying to make sure I make a precedent of saying this over and over, is that, like the military, when you go in the military, they expect you to be an adult already. Even if you're 17 years old, getting signed up by your mom or dad, but other than that, they expect you to be an adult. They don't teach law in the military. It's not even on the. It's nothing. So it's like, because when you're in the military, one, you're going through your training, you're going through your tech training, you're going to all the training and whatnot, because you train, right? And it's all day, every day. So it's like you're already under a set of laws and orders in another spectrum, which are the first laws. So what came first in this nation, but the federal part's completely oblivious. And so, that's why it does. Everybody has a responsibility to know the laws and the orders on both sides. You even as a civilian, you need to know the military laws as much as possible, and regulations and everything else that it depends on, what it is, but still. That's why I tell people, man, I've read more stuff. I've forgotten more stuff. Just like when I'm talking, sometimes I can just bleep out and go, wait, what was I talking about? Because there's so much information. But joint publications, there's so many joint publications, and they're all 80, 100, 200, 300, 600 pages. All right. Now, they aren't all applicable to a certain situation sometimes. There's specific situations, but some do, and some apply to it, some don't. But that's why they all have their lane of which they're in, and all the operators are in that lane as well. But, when people think about military, that's why some veterans don't know what's going on. And I'm like, I got attacked by a few. It wasn't a lot, but And I'm like, if you're a general and don't know what's currently invoked in laws and orders, it don't matter if you're a general. It don't matter if you're a congressman, retired judge, whatever. It don't matter if you don't know what's currently in the laws and orders current, and especially to a certain situation or an operation, you can be totally oblivious and have the rank and have the actual capability and skill set to even understand it. But if you don't know what's going on, so it's like me. I tell people, it's one thing if they don't voice that. It's another if they voice it and or put it in writing that it's all a conspiracy or a hogwash and this and that and other. Then all they did was timestamp. And especially me, I screenshot everything, and I email it to a certain email. But, I'm not going to use it like in a bad, in spiteful way. But I'm like, hey, if you put it in writing, you timestamp, and you just show the world that you're a what or whatever your title is, and I got you, right? And so you don't have to. I tell everybody your Department of Education's right here, right between these eyes, behind these eyes and between these ears. That's your Department of Education. You have a brain. It's up to you to read and apply it. But that the military don't teach laws at all, and I think if there's a way that somehow in the future they're going to have to somehow. To me, that's another opinion. But at the same time, everything will be cleaned out, thank God. But we do need to put an initiative somehow, some way into all aspects of keeping our foundation and what we're here for, appreciating why we're here. And so many people just don't appreciate why you're here.
Well, but also don't forget the military's, especially basic training, et cetera, their job is to teach that respect, that responsibility.
Yeah.
You're going to hear an order, you're going to follow an order, and that's really what it boils down to. And if you're going to take the chance and question that order, you'll obviously suffer the consequences for it. But that's what that part boils down to. And it's so important. We've gotten so far away. Look, I came yay close to being a victim of the draft back in 1972. But it's important that people get that military training because so many people lack that discipline, lack that respect, and certainly lack that responsibility. These are things, when we restructure the DOE and we have education back in our schools instead of a freak show, history will be taught, the Constitution will be taught, the Bill of Rights will be taught, and everything that led up to it will be taught in factual notes. But the rest of it, and hopefully that will be brought to once this comes to fruition, is that we'll be able to get back to the point of a one-income family. So somebody's home raising those kids and teaching that respect and that responsibility, because that's where everything fell to crap in this country. And that was their agenda to begin with. And the whole thing, it wasn't done by the media, but the idea was certainly pushed out to the masses by the media, putting everybody into a position. And, I always think back to one of my old bosses who was a close friend of mine, who used to tell me all the time, and I wasn't smart enough to listen to him, don't get caught in the golden handcuffs. Live on your salary, not the extras that come. And now people have multiple incomes in their family and still can't make it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I taught a bunch of buddies that too, because I'm like, man, you have to, whatever you're bringing in income wise, if you absolutely lost your job, you lost it. But let's say that you have some retirement or some kind of supplement like that. If you can pay, if you're in a 1-bedroom apartment and you can put your lights on, feed yourself, water bill, and maybe a vehicle, whatever it is. But that's what I tell people. I'll pick on my own people in the South down here. like you'll see it. It's always like a 2 or 3 bedroom house, whether it's 1 story, 2 story. All right. All the guys have a 1500 or 2500 HD 4x4 truck that they never pull anything with, hardly ever. Right. So 4-wheel drive though. And 4-door, 4-wheel drive, huge trucks. All right. They never pull anything with it. They never get them dirty. I bet that they never even put it in 4-wheel drive, maybe once a year. All right. Because they want to, not have to. And then also they have a boat, an ATV. They have a hunting lease. All right. If you don't know what a hunting lease is, ladies and gentlemen, that's where you get a piece of property. You pay X amount for it, and you go, harvest a deer or something on there. All right. And those are $800, $1,000, $2,000 a year. All right. They all play golf. Their wives have some kind of like nice Infiniti or a Camry or a Toyota, like 4Runner, something that's in the 35 to 45, 50,000 bracket. All right. They all have 2 or 3 kids. They're all playing sports. All right. So that requires what? All the extracurricular, the gear, all the stuff you need for sports. And then their mortgages, $2,000, $2,500 a month, something like that. And you go look at the base median of the state of Alabama or Mississippi or Louisiana. Look in the South. Look at the base medians, $35,000. And these people have, $2,000 mortgages on a minimum. Their car notes are $500 to $800 each vehicle. All right, their kids. Only out there had multiple kids. How much that is a year? All right, but just the food alone, you're just a food and the regular raisin. Then all the sports. And these are the people whining and complaining about gas and all this stuff. So it's like you have to be big bad wolf sometimes to be the one that says that. I know people don't want to hear it, but you got to be big bad wolf and go, okay. But then you're also in the bonus realm. You don't need all this stuff. You don't need it. You want it, but you don't need it. But you're the very ones whining, complaining, and fussing about gas and eggs and food and this. But everybody I know, even during COVID, but even all during everybody I know, even during the 2008 recession, all right, all the way back there, everybody I know, what were they doing on the weekends? Drinking, smoking, at the lake, playing golf. They did what? They said, well, I'll cut here. I'm going to have my beer now. I'm going to have me a 6-pack. I'll cut back over here. All right. So everybody always has time for what? Entertainment. This what we're talking about, the people that we're talking about, they always have time for entertainment and themselves. All right. Not the greater good of humanity. All right. Going, hey, you know why you have 2 and 3 jobs right now? Do you want to really know why? Let me show you why. And it goes back to that. Like I told a friend of mine recently, I said, man, whatever you're pulling with your retirement, at the end of the day, if you absolutely cannot get a job, if you can live off of your base model income, all right, and have food, water, and shelter, you have everything you need. Not maybe what you want, but you have everything you need. All right. And you may never get what you want, but there's a way to be happy with what you have. Right. And so many people have forgotten that. It's like my dad and grandpa, they always said we didn't even know we were poor because we didn't know we didn't have what we didn't have because we didn't have it. Right. I remember him saying he went to Cleveland, Ohio when he was a boy. And my great uncle lived up there and worked up there during the boom of the steel industry and all that was going on. And they went up there and said, he said, I'll never forget. He said, I looked like those kids on commercials where they had his hands on the glass and looking at the TV. First time he'd ever seen a TV. All right. And my dad and my grandpa was like, well, when we get the money, we'll get one, But that was years ago. That would have been 1950. All right. And that seems like and to me, I'm like, that don't seem that long ago to me, though. But, when you hear your dad, you hear that black and white story, and it's like, no, it was in color to him. But it sounds black and white when you're growing up. But now, 1950, it wasn't that long ago, right? And so when you look at the things, and when you look at our history, so I had a great uncle that was 101 years old when he passed. So I always use this analogy. I said he was born in 1909. All right. Well, if he was 10 years old in 1919 and he met a guy who was 100, well, that'd have been 1819. Well, that's when Alabama became a state. What do you know about that? right? So if that guy though, born in 1819, when he was 10 years old, met someone who was 100, so 1829, that 100-year-old would have been in 1729, which was before all of our hit. So don't take that many to go back to before our foundation. So our foundation's not that old in the grand scheme of things. Like all of my great grandparents, except for one, were born in the 1800s. Just my great grandparents alone. All right. So it's not that long ago. That's why our nation is still fairly young in another kind of manner. And where we've gotten to not appreciate that is it was very dangerous where we did get. And we can't get to a place where you want to fight right when you feel like you lost something. We got to fight for America every single day. Not the wrong kind of fight, but the right kind of spirit, the right attitude, and fight for it daily. And we won't have to get to these detrimental cases ever again if we fight for it daily and keep that precedent in the schoolyards, in our families, at our dinner tables again, which we also need again. All right. And so I know we're going to get back to that. I believe that. I think God gave us another opportunity at the world and great awakening. And I think that's exactly, like what's taking place. I feel that. Also, I don't know about you, but I felt it when it happened. I woke up one morning and the sun was coming through my windows. And I texted everybody I knew. I said, man, I finally feel that relief. I feel that weight. Not that the operation's over, but I felt that light. And what we talk about, the light's going to shine on the darkness, and it's a new spirit, and the evil's being removed, and all that. And I felt that spirit, and I could every day, the sun, and I could feel that spirit, and I feel that heavenly spirit. I feel the Holy Spirit, like it's a spiritual operation overall, and I feel that daily. And I tell people, the way you feel that it's not going to be me telling you. It's going to be reading what's in place that provided this operation, that cleaned out the swamp, that drained the swamp. That's what you witnessed. President Trump told you, we're taking the power out of D.C., giving it back to you, the people. Well, that required draining the swamp. And that required exposing people. The worst ones, the liberals, at least the liberal, they're open. You can see that. The worst ones are the ones who say all the right terms. They use all the MAGA terms. They use all the good, feel good trigger words that they're keywords that get you lured in. Those are the ones that require skill sets to go, that's not correct. Here's the law right here. Here's the order right here. They're not talking about that. This is what you need right here. This is your foundation. This is what President Trump just worked with. This is what he just said, or whatever it may be. Here it is. Those are the ones. So you don't want to, you can't say drain the swamp and then support the replication of the swamp, And so that's why it does take spirit sometimes in that what you said a while ago, a little kick in the butt.
And that's also why we are where we are, because we still got a whole bunch of people, again, going with responsibility and with doing your due diligence and discerning. You still have a whole bunch of people who, well, Derek said, or Mark said, or Dave said, and they'll always go through that instead of, well, yeah, I heard them say this, but I checked this out because it didn't sit well with me, and I found such and such. And this is, where you're talking about the, your 101-year-old grandfather, and if you met somebody 100 years before that, back in those days, they didn't have, unless you were part of the super wealthy, people didn't have that sense of entitlement. They worked for what they wanted. But again, my career right out there, and I always go to that shake and bake commercial, and I helped, the media has gone and really enforced that sense of entitlement on a lot of people, which is why people will go and they'll wait online 3 days for their, the next iPhone or the next Xbox, but they won't go on election day to go and vote. And that's why, rather than stop going like this all the time, you see commercials 5 and 6 or 7 times a day for Sonobello, and you can go in and get the body that you want because they suck the fat out of you. That's not going to keep you from putting it back on. But it's, again, a sense of entitlement. Everybody wants that instant gratification. And this is hopefully what a lot of people will understand in regard to the Great Awakening. Because, and I know people have heard me say this a billion times, I'm going to say it again. We have to get from selfishness to selflessness. And once we do have that relief income-wise, that it's not to run out and, buy your new pickup truck, or to buy the new, that Cracker Box mansion or whatever. It's to go and make sure that you're set and then help others. We have to unify. And the media, even though it's white hat controlled, is still in a divisive mode. And I'm waiting for them to finally take that turn and stop the divisiveness. And I don't know if you think that'll ever happen, but that's the next step that we have to take, because we got to stop the divisiveness. I mean, can you see that happening eventually with the media?
I do. Well, I see it not only media, but I mean, that goes back to now, they'll say, well, they abolished that in 1800, the 1799 Congress, where they took out the seditious part of the Aliens Act, but they also followed back up with the Communications Decency Act and all these other things, and that's why President Trump said Section 230 has to be amended. And then he also is alluded to that with the executive order that he signed, where he had on the State of the Union this time around, where he had the females up there with Melania, and he talked about where, like, just taking someone's photo and maliciously saying stuff out there, that's a start to getting to it, right? Because we have reached a place now that you have to be really delicate, especially with children, like 15, 16, 18-year-olds who are so glued on their phones daily, right? I was talking to someone the other day where they said that they were at like something, right, an event, and that they never put the phone down. It was always there. The kids always had it, unless it was to go, it was like, I think on a wakeboard or something like that, right? That's the only thing that got the phone down. The rest of the time, they were just like that the whole day. All right. So we have so many people now who feel like that's their First Amendment and that's their freedom and that's that. But if you're speaking against the government and the government's doing everything the right way, small government, not big, that's why they drained the swamp, and they've also cut back. That's what Doge was for. But I'm not talking about government meaning control of your life, but I meant like the small government doing what they're supposed to be doing as prescribed by the Constitution. There's a Constitution for it. All right. If they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, our leaders, et cetera, we got to have leaders because our population where it is. Well, we can't have people out there keeping that divisiveness going. And it doesn't matter what side they're on. That's what I keep saying about all these people out there that call themselves Republicans, patriots, and all this stuff. You're only that title if you're showing exactly what's going on with what is like an operation. It's a military operation. Well, you need to be talking about what's public knowledge of that operation. But then you also have to have what? You can't just go, okay, read. Yep, I know. I think I know. And then, no, you need to know what they are right here. That's why President Trump also said, he said, isn't it nice to have a president who doesn't need a teleprompter? Because it's all coming from here, right? Well, same thing with politicians. It needs to be here. Both of these need to be intact. Passion and mind. Not memorized, not scripted. Passion and mind. I want to do this. All right. So all of that. And so, yeah, I think it will, because when you go back to the 1798 Aliens Act, it had that seditions part with it. Where back then, if you were saying anything against what was going on militarily and government-wise, you could be punished for that. And I think the only way that we can move forward, I don't believe we went through all this to go right back to what the swamp looked like. But they have to do it delicately because of all the kids, especially these 18 to 22-year-olds in college, who will think that, oh, it's a dictator and all this if you went and took their phones away. So that's where I do think that the best way, I could be wrong about it, but I don't make predictions because I don't know the months and the days they're going to do something, but he couldn't start a foreign war. That's already been proven. Ukraine, everything that took place with Yemen and Iran and Ukraine were all in executive orders by the deep state, ladies and gentlemen. So you can't be pointing at President Trump. He is ending all these, like we were just talking about earlier. 1979 is the oldest executive order with national emergency. It's Iran, Jimmy Carter. They've been chanting death to America, death to Israel for 40 years. All right. Why did the bureaucrats continue this order every 2 years? It's been continued every 2 years since 1979. Yemen, 2012. Ukraine was way back as well. I mean, there was 4 in 1 year with Ukraine with Obama. 3 of those in 1 month, the national emergency. All right, so we already had a reason to be in those nations. Even if we would have gone into Ukraine, we'd have had a reason to be there. All right, because of what this crap they did. But President Trump got Russia to go into Ukraine, the soccer ball. All right, that was all that. And then Israel started everything with what was going on with Iran. And then we come in and finish it because we're the only ones with the 30,000-pound bunker bombs. We're the only ones that have that technology. So we did that. Yemen, we were bombing the hell out of them a couple weeks ago, and no one was raving about that. These little things. So in order to get out of what we've been in and what you have to do it delicately, right? So I think without doomsday, he didn't start wars. It's not a doomsday thing. That's what I think. I think that, I told somebody it sounds braggadocious, I guess, and it sounds kind of, for the wrong people who hear it, for right now, the ones who are still hanging on to the hate and all that themselves. But in 2022, I was on a tour, and I'm the one that started doing the shuffle walk, the penguin walk, where I grabbed my butt and all this, and I was replicating, quote unquote, Biden. It was after that President Trump started doing that. And I'd already met with him during that time period and all this, first time I met him and all things. So, he does look at people. He gets all kinds of ideas from, he couldn't do it at the time because it's an operation, but we were sitting there one day and he was looking at my True Social. And I had put up the picture of Nikki Haley at this CPAC. And I put on there, my quote says, she couldn't sell a dog turd to a lawnmower. And he laughed. Like, I wish I could express like his laughter. I'm like, because that's just, he said, I love this guy. Right. Well, I'm just like, I come up with the most random sayings. Right. But he was like, he wanted to share it so bad. He's like, no, I can't right now because of certain things. And I get that. But he does get, he takes, words and things he hears from other people. And so it's like his way of validating you in all kinds of aspects. So I think what they can do, I don't know if they will, but I think it'd be genius if they do it. How do you get people all in one sitting without doomsday? Unfortunately, 9/11, it did that in a doomsday effect. No matter what we want to split the hairs, I know what 9/11 was, but let's forget about the overall right now. But it brought people together. Tragedy. We don't need tragedy to bring people together. That planned tragedy, especially. We don't need that. That's obviously evil. That should be self-explanatory to anybody that a planned tragedy is evil. And the people who thought that it was a real tragedy, that's even more evil when they find out that it was a planned strategy, right? And tragedy. So we're not going back to the deep state. We're not going back to the replication of that. We're not going back to the swamp. That's what President Trump's whole mission, that's why they chose him. It wasn't him. They chose him. He said, yes, I'll do this. Well, the EAS. Everybody talks about the EAS, and they call it the EBS, right? Well, there's one thing that has never been used before in history. It's the emergency alert system on the presidential side. All right. Well, the president has full control of TV, radio, internet broadcasts. And I just proved this a couple weeks ago when President Trump put up an article. It didn't get a lot of attention by people out there. I'm the only one that posted on it. right? Certain things. Appeals court upheld that President Trump can keep a ban on the Associated Press. Well, if they're upholding it, that means it's already put on. See, they were already banned. This was upheld. It was upholding, but upheld, right? So it's already been there. It was saying the Associated Press is not allowed at Mar-a-Lago. They're not allowed at the White House. The Associated Press, ladies and gentlemen. So it's saying it's an upholding. Well, that's 47 U.S. Code, Section 606, which is titled War Powers of the President. He can control radio, TV, internet, all right, transmissions, etc. He can suspend them. He can do whatever he wants to do during a time of war. Well, you have that war order by the Democratic House introduced. The war order is there, 1550, Title 50, Chapter 33. That's your War Powers Act. There's your war order. Then you got to go look at everything I talk about, the laws and orders under that. So he has that power. Well, to me, I think, what do? You take the EAS, right? And wherever they get to this state, whatever it is, whatever's the last final act, you hit the EAS. And I can just see people in every bar watching TV, watching sports, right? And they're watching whatever it is. And all of a sudden, bam, all the TVs, every single TV, every single phone, every single laptop, whatever you're on that has a transmission, CBS, ABC, whatever it is, OAN, Newsmax, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, whatever it is, your phone, iPhone, Android, whatever you have, Sprint, Cricket, yada, yada, it don't matter. Whatever you have, all at one time. And then Obama, whether they're good, bad, or different, I know who they are and you don't. If you don't, but whatever. You have all these different people all in one accord, either spill the beans on what's been going on, all of them, and they support President Trump, and then they take their mask off, whatever it is. That right there would make everybody in this nation go, what the, you know what, did I just witness? They can't turn their phone off. They can turn the TV off. They can turn their phone off theoretically, but they can't escape it because their neighbors will be watching it. Everybody will be seeing it. You can't escape it, right? That right there, that's what I would do if I was Commander-in-Chief. Now, it may not happen like that, but that's how we get that's how you get everybody to a place of going like that, like the screen froze. Like if you just freeze over there, you go. Like, we don't want people to think we froze, though, and they go jump off the internet. But still, that's what would get people to go, holy shnikes. What in the and then you can't be pointing, you know, a liberal can't be pointing at a Republican or a Republican. You'd be like, what the heck? So, and then everybody's phones and TVs would be however long it would last, but you're there. And then you can move forward. Then you can get that would create a whole different kind of not a doomsday, not something where it lasts for a temporarily appointed time, because that would be something that would be like epic for life, right? And for your lifetime, our lifetime, right? Whoever's living, it'd be epic for that lifetime. I just think that's what will get us out of the divisiveness and get us into, okay, man, I was wrong. Bubble, you know, all the people out there, all this, because it's just malicious, vicious right now. I mean, the liberals, they don't even make sense right now, and they can't be spoken to. It don't matter. They hate the military, most of them. So it don't matter if I tell them, hey, look, I'm not Republican, Democrat. I'm a retired veteran, showing you this is a humanitarian world, bipartisan. They don't want to hear it. So, you know, and some Republicans don't either. So how do you get out of that? You do something that's just never been done before and that's epic, but not doomsday and not scary. You don't scare people. And, you know, so like Iran could be scary to some people, sure, if they don't know what's going on, but they can. But, you know, that's not going to last long. July the 4th, look where we are. I mean, they did this in perfect timing, just enough to let people chatter a little bit. But the July 4th, President Trump gave a marker about this July 4th. He said, we're going to start celebrating all the way up to our big birthday. So, I mean, it's not gonna. It's the little hiccups that people might be getting stuck on, but I think that's how they bring that cohesiveness in. It's like it'll be something that's more happy oriented and more like shocking happy or happy shocking. And then you can get people to shut up. Especially though when they can't get on their phone though. That would be the thing. It's like not trying to like emergency wise, yeah. So it wouldn't last too long because you might need your phone for emergencies. But at the same time, I think that's how you do it. I could be wrong. And that's not a prediction anyway. That's just an idea, like what I would do if I was commander. But how would you separate all the stuff that you and I lived under in your generation, my generation? It's the same stuff. And you and I were subject to the same stuff. Everybody listen, we've been under the same stuff from 2016 back, however old you are. It was the same swamp. Just pick your slice of the pie when you had it. Right? So how do you put that divider there? President Trump didn't do all of this just to go, to still have a portion of people hate his guts and want him assassinated. I mean, we're at this place where liberals literally to this day still, they'll put on their comment boxes, woke up, he's still alive. I mean, that's evil. That's pure evil. I didn't want Obama dead. I mean, I didn't vote for the guy, didn't like the guy. But I would never wish them to be dead like that, because when you root and cheer for someone to be dead like that, you're no different than the other side rooting and cheering for the others to be dead in that kind of way. This whole thing is about people. It's about our spirits, right? It's about who we are as people. And cheering for people to be dead, you need to go look at the Law of War Manual. Go look at the humanity in the Law of War Manual and read what it talks about. That's what I tell people to do. It's like there's discipline and punishment, yes. But you can't be cheering for some things either, because everybody's a product of what? What we're sitting here talking about. Brainwashing, control. The terrorists, yeah, they get punished, but they're a product of being trained their whole life that we hate them and that we're evil and we're trying to take their way of life. And they're trained that way. So they're a product of their raising. All right, they're still doing evil things, sure. And they get punished, absolutely. But when you train up a child the right way and you put all the stuff that we're talking about, respect, responsibility, accountability, honesty, when you train up these children and you train up people, then we become the what? The walking generations, the talking, the action. And I think that how you got to break all that, you got to do something, but it can't be the replication of anything everybody's saying, the doomsday effect. It can't be that. It's got to be a complete opposite. And I think that's how they do it.
Well, it's one of those things when we sit and we look at this and remember the fact that it is a spiritual movement. People like that, in the end, are going to have to answer to the same person that we're all going to have to answer.
Everybody.
So I don't concern myself with them in the least. But one of our favorite people always likes to say, it's one thing to be fooled. It's another thing to admit that you've been fooled. And that's going to be the hardest part for a lot of these people on both sides. But that is, that realization.
That's one way to do it. That's one way to get everybody fooled at the same time. And they all have to admit it all at once together, right? It's kind of like, well, it's like ripping the Band-Aid off. It's just like, that is how you rip the Band-Aid off with that. But it's kind of one of those where you can be the ones that are sitting there going, well, they're like that petrified, right? All I can hear is Hank Williams, because I grew up not far from Hank Williams, and my grandpa was roommates with him years ago, all that stuff. So, to us, it's just not, the world sees him as a icon, and I'm like, it was just Hank to everybody around here. But I could just hear that song he's talking about. I'm petrified. Talking about, but I'm going to drink till I'm petrified. I think that, I'm not promoting drinking like that, but I think people would just be like, oh my God, but it would rip the Band-Aid off, but it wouldn't be, I don't see that being something people just start fighting about. I guess you can fight about anything, I guess, but still, it seems like that'd be one of those things where it's just like this, like sudden, just like take everybody's breath. And then also you're seeing what you thought was real right? And people like us been saying, CIA's been doing this for like 40, 50 years, like the mask, right? You know, it's like seeing these people. It's like Wilson from Home Improvement. Everybody remembers watching that show in the 90s. And when they ended the show, they actually had a special where they had a special show where they brought the cast out. And then, you know, there was Tim Allen and all the others who were the lead stars, but they brought Wilson out, you know, because that's all you saw with Wilson, right? All shows, everybody's like, what does Wilson look like? And we didn't have Google back then. It was like, you didn't know, like, what did Wilson look like? You know, and then all of a sudden, here's Wilson, you know, and they made this big to do about it, right? So I don't know. I think that that's something that I think that's in the tool bag. I could be wrong, but you know, why did we go through the puppet state? That's all a tactic. It's all a government exile and puppet state or tactics that were used in the 40s, and we did it on our own nation. In this era, and they showed you. I mean, Biden, anybody that knows the real Biden, it's like they don't look anything alike. All of them. Pelosi don't, especially Fetterman. He's the one that really looked way off, you know. And then you got Kamala. I mean, they all look different, you know. And people are going, "Oh, they're just getting older." And I'm like, "No, come on, people."
No, I'm sorry. You get older, your skin doesn't get tighter. Okay, I've noticed on myself, my skin is getting tighter. It's getting looser. So
well, and I'm like, you know, it's like the whole like that goes back to again. That's that not once they admit one lie, they got to admit all of them. So it goes back to they don't want to admit being fooled. What we just talking about, one of your people, right? They don't want to admit they're being fooled. But once you admit one, then once you question one thing, then you got to go question everything. And they don't want to do that because then they got to question it all. But they're going to have to here soon. You know, it's like everything's like. This whole operation funneled the deep state into a funnel, like it ostracized them, right? And it's all tactical. I mean, it depends on what side you want to look at. But if you're just on the normal, they got squeezed, and it's called a squeeze. They put the squeeze on them, right? And they just funneled them, and then they ran out of tactics. They have no more. They have no more moves. Great example for the Patriots that everybody knows this. But they say President Trump's a 5D chess player. Well, let me show you how to apply that. Go back to the speech where Biden, quote unquote, was doing he did all the Hitler moves and gestures, the black and the red, right? Showed it real evil because that's what they use with demons is black and red, right? And they had the 2 Marine Corps who were not in the proper uniforms according to Marine Corps regulations. All right, but that right there, the same time periods when the Queen died. All right. And then they showed him acting like he was the one acting like a king. Right? All these things, all these gestures. Well, what's important about that is if you and I, Mark, were playing chess, but in this particular situation, because you have a lot of stuff and a lot of dirt and you're lying to people, not really people, I'm making a point here. If Mark was a bad guy, let me say it that way. If Mark was a bad dude and I know I got dirt on Mark and Mark's over here lying to you and saying this, that, and other and all, you know, and I say, all right, Mark, let's play a game of chess, all right? And I'm playing you, all right? Well, there's a tactic if you're a real good chess player, and, you know, a lot of people were in history excellent that could actually pin their opponents a certain way. The best move on the board to do that is not to beat you outright and knock you off. It's to trap your king. To knock your queen out because the queen protects the king, right? And then you trap the king where there's no more moves on the board. So then it becomes a waiting game. But let's say this is hypothetical, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just say that Mark and I were playing this chess game and I trap his king. And all right. I can sit here as long as you want to sit here. I got food, water, everything I need. And I got someone over here, they're going to keep bringing me food and water until you do what? Raise the white flag up and surrender. But through surrender, that means you have to do what? You have to admit that you were trapped, that you were defeated. Even though I didn't beat you, it wasn't a win like that, but I trapped you, I still beat you because I beat you with logic and I trapped you. I didn't just wipe you out. Well, sometimes you don't want to beat your opponent to say I won. President Trump trap the deep state. They have to admit that's who's going to exonerate him. It won't be a Republican. It won't be a general. It won't be military that exonerates him. It's going to be the other side that exonerates him, because that's what that replicated. When the queen was knocked out, that meant the crown was destroyed. And you got quote unquote Biden up there, and they're still spewing all this stuff to the average people out there. But when you know chess and you know the laws and orders, they were trapped. All right. And they got to raise the white flag and surrender. They're going to have to raise it up, and they're going to have to exonerate President Trump. They're going to do it how? Admitting everything. All right. So it's real simple. And that's why Q will tell you and all the other people, but Q is why I try to tell people Q is a clearance for the Department of Energy. All right. So it's not conspiracy. Q is an actual clearance that you can attain via the DOE. All right. And it told you from the get-go, and all other special operators can tell you how this works. But these people, when everything starts hitting more and more and more, and they start turning, everything's going to turn, and they're going to start praising President Trump even more. The only place they'll want to be able to go to is a place like Guantanamo Bay, because that's the only thing that's going to be able to protect them when the real people find out what they've done. Even the liberals who thought, but when they find out what they did with children, especially children, all right, but even more so women, adults, but when they find out with child trafficking and sex trafficking law, what these people have been doing for years, the only place they're going to want to be is someone that's going to protect them via humanitarian law that gives them dignity, even though they're going to get punished. But that's how that works. And that's why you've seen these things, and they're all part of that puzzle. And that's what you witness.
And hopefully we will witness it all very, very soon. And
all you got to do is hope that you live. That's if you're living, now it ain't gonna take forever. I don't mean it like that either. Like if you're 40 years old sitting here watching, you're thinking, "Oh, will I be 90?" No, that's just meant things do happen. But just hope that you live in the next year or so, and you're gonna see some stuff.
Well, we're already past 2 hours, but I got one final thing that I wanted to bring up to you, and we hit on it a little bit before. Everybody talking, it seems though the only thing they know in the Constitution is the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. The only two things that have really been on everybody's mouths. Both very, very, very well misunderstood and abused. However, the Second Amendment, by the people who know it, hasn't been abused at all. It's been abused by the powers that be. It's been abused by the media, but not by the people who abide by the Second Amendment. First Amendment, however, which involves the media and involves all the idiots out there who, if you say something that they don't agree with, you're violating their First Amendment rights, don't get it. I know you get it very well. You want to give people a little tutorial on the First Amendment?
Well, I mean, it's I always tell people, like, when they hear freedom of speech and the freedom of expression, they even forget that terminology. But when our founders established this is so funny that you brought this up, because when I was at Colorado State University, liberal college, we had this veteran center, and this is the craziest thing that they ever did. This is liberal thinking at a college like that. So they established, and I hope they hear this, but they established the veteran center, and then they had this thing called the adult learner, meaning like if you thought you're an adult, I mean that could be anybody, right? If you think you're an adult, you could come in there with a bunch of veterans. And we had one guy, he would come in there, man. He couldn't stand a liberal, and he looked like if you're from the South and you went up there, you look at him, you'd have thought he was, because he had this he just looked like a lumberjack, but he had what they call that? It's like a train engineer hat, and he looked liberal to someone who was from the South, but he couldn't stand a liberal. And no one could. And that's where I met a guy there that was special operations too. And he was older, using his GI Bill. and actually using a Montgomery bill. That's how old he was. And he won't let me tell his name, which is cool, because he don't want recognition. But he's the one I talk about, the 3 fundamental things that changed America. And we'd sit there every day and we talked about this. And we would take on people. I mean, we could sit there and listen and we'd take on people. But then you have these people who thought they were adults. They walk in there and they would just be, and they'd hear us talking and they'd get mad. I'm like, look, this is a veteran center first, right? We're going to be talking about things like this. So when you talk about the Bill of Rights, we were talking about this one time, a buddy and I, about this very thing, same thing, Colorado State, and we were talking about it. And we educated on so many people. I was like, do you realize the Bill of Rights were actually written as a second constitution? A lot of people don't know that. It was written as a second constitution because back then it wasn't as like it is now. And a lot of people want to do that. They want to get to today. They'll hear like my grandpa and them when they were on tour buses in the 50s with music. It ain't nothing like they look now. It looked like just a regular old cheese wagon that got painted. And they moved the certain chairs around and made a little bit more room in there, but there wasn't luxury buses and things like that. So people you get to today, like my grandpa was talking about, you get to today and they don't want to look back on what it really looked like, what you went through, right? And he was like, no, you don't want to live back here because you didn't have this, and this, like you have that. So when you look at those things like that, right, people don't want to look back at then. Well, back then, they weren't arguing and fussing about like what we're talking about. They had very little, especially after the war. They didn't want to go back to do that again. They didn't want to fight again. So they established something. But they had the Federalists back then, and then you had anti-Federalists, right? Well, Federalists wanted more of the, federal government in control. The anti-Federalists wanted more of a centralized government with your states with very little federal. All right. And both can work if you have what we're sitting here talking about, accountability and responsibility. So it still depends on what you're doing on the front with everything that you're doing, but not too big, obviously, but like federalism. So that's what our founders were talking about back then. So when you had the crew that wrote the Bill of Rights, which even some of the guys even wrote on that as well, that were original, some of these guys were on the same pages, but they're also on different pages. So they had all these different literatures. And so they put these Bill of Rights in. They became what we call the amendments. There were actually 12 at first, and then they adopted 10. Right? So what we know is the first and the second were actually the let's see, I'll get my bearings straight here. So first and the second, it'd be the second and the third. Right? So they weren't the actual, it'd be the third and the fourth. Take that back. There were 2 ahead of that. So what we know is that the first was actually the third. All right. So a lot of people don't know that simple. Now, does that really matter? Maybe not direct applied like to your question, but it does set things up for people to see what was established. And the Bill of Rights was written as a whole. So it was a whole. You don't separate all the others. They all went in a whole, and it's kind of like our founders did with the legislative, executive, and judicial. They were put in that order. They had separate powers and separate roles, but they were in that order. So when you go read the Bill of Rights and the 10 in one that were adopted, you can't separate one without the other, right? And then you got to know what? The Declaration of Independence. So it goes back to when foreign and domestic was added to the oath, 1862. All right. Abraham Lincoln, they added that then because they were already experiencing foreign entities, not China or Iraq or Afghanistan. Foreign meaning if you don't go by our ideologies, if you don't know our foundation and why we're here, every bit of our literature of our founders, why they got to where they got, how they wrote that, and how they set up what they did. If you didn't, you were foreign. Like President Trump in Texas, he said anybody that sets foot on this territory, you will be treated with the military, not federal, not state, military property. So you're going to go through military court and military law if you're acting any certain way on that property. All right. Same thing with California and all the other parameters they set up. You set foot here, you're going to be treated as a foreign entity to that. Foreign didn't mean us to go fight in Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan and Syria. It didn't mean that. So people have to know that as well. So when you go look at those, that's why I always bring up the Third Amendment. The third is the most humorous because of one reason. No one can ever quote it. No one I've ever met can ever mention a Third Amendment. And it's very important for a certain reason. I pulled it up where we can read it by specific terminologies for right now because of the old school terms. So after your Second Amendment, which says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, man, I mean, there's a state right off the gate. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But watch this crap. This is so funny what they did. The Third Amendment. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in a time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So that was telling, if you were in the military, right, time of peace or time of war, you couldn't go AWOL. It's what we call AWOL now, absent while on leave, meaning like, oh, I'm scared. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be anymore, right? You couldn't go hide, and you couldn't hide me, right? Because I was under a what? An oath, right? I took this oath, right? So that Third Amendment is so key that can point out why it all went together and how you can't separate the first, your freedom of expression, your freedom of speech, without also the Second Amendment. You have all these people now, these liberals. Oh, well, our founders didn't know about AR-15s. I'm like, AR-15 has nothing to do with anything. And AR-15 is not the actual caliber. AR-15 was the title of the gun. That's the name of it, right? And you and I, again, I have guns all in my house. They ain't ever shot a soul. They ain't ever thought about shooting a soul. All right. I've taken some deer that I put right here. But other than that, I know people ain't like that. But I'm like, well, I know one thing. If the country failed, if it did, it ain't. But if it ever did, I know how to live off the land because I was taught to do that. But so the freedom of expression, I tell people all the time, if your First Amendment doesn't support our foundation, our Revolutionary War that kicked off first, military established, well, Army first, then the military law, Navy, Marine Corps, First Flag, Declaration, Articles of Confederation, even learning from those, even though that's redrafted to the Constitution. But read those to see where they were in that mindset in 1777. Then the Constitution, then the Bill of Rights, December the 15th, 1791. All right. See where they were during that time period. The Federalist Papers, quite a few. That's a lot of reading right there, but it's great reading. And Thomas Paine, some of the stuff even then. Thomas Paine's a real quick excerpt here. It's a great thing because you got a lot of Christians, right, who are like that. And then you got atheists right now. Thomas Paine didn't believe in God the way that the founders did back then. But see, they believed in let live. That's just show you that his common sense was just as equal as all their other literature. And they didn't ostracize him back then because he didn't believe the way they believed, but he believed in the way of the whole, right? And that's why the First Amendment, when you hear people out there saying, well, I have my First Amendment. Your First Amendment don't mean jack dilly crap if it don't support why you're here. And so that's why mine trumps, all pun intended, the ones that say the polar opposite of this nation. When they use the word Constitution, don't know anything about it. When they say the word, they never say the words Declaration of Independence, but they'll say democracy. Democracy is nowhere in our Declaration, our Constitution, or Bill of Rights. The only time the word, one time the word democracy was in our founders' literature, was in Federalist Paper number 10. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, wrote this. And he said, pure democracies are dangerous. And here you have all these liberals spewing out there, we're a democracy, he's tearing our democracy and democracy. Nowhere in our founders' literature, except for one spot, and the one spot it is in Federalist Paper number 10, it says pure democracies are dangerous by the father of the Constitution, the same one who had to go in 1803, Marbury versus Madison, James Madison. There he is. Here's the guy who was one of the main authors, known as the father of the Constitution, who wrote the Constitution, established the three branches of government, established the judicial system, the court system itself, having to go into the Supreme Court, the highest court, and tell what a law looked like. And they ruled landslide and landmark case. They ruled in 1803, 16 years after they wrote the Constitution. It took only 16 years for certain people to start being what? Persuaded, compromised. 16 years. And the founding father, it wasn't like it was an offspring of his. The founding father is going into the Supreme Court thinking, I established this place. It was right here. I'm the one that created this. I'm the one that created this system, this checks and balance. And I'm having to go into the Supreme Court and say, a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, right? And it was a landmark and landslide case. And the First Amendment applies the same way because it came from the same people. All this came from the same people. So when you hear a liberal out there talking about their First Amendment, it's like, no, you can't even name you can't even say anything from the Constitution. Just one line somewhere, somehow. And it proves it when you say we're a democracy. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution shows we're a republic. All right. Now, I don't expect people, it can't remember everything, and you should pull up and at least know how to read certain things. But, you don't have to memorize the whole thing, but you need to know the basis of it and be able to say, oh, no, that's not correct. If someone even says, well, does the Constitution say this? No, it don't say that. Or does the amendment say, no, it don't say that. Well, you need to at least know that, whether you can repeat it line for line. So that's why I tell people, this is the stuff you need to put core in your heart, because this is everything that we're here for. Everything that we're having these conversations stems from those founders. They established this. They established our way of life. They established our system, and we got to get it back to that. So I always love that because they put these in a specific order. And the Third Amendment proves all of it because you have your freedom of expression. If that's taken away, or if you're being threatened, then you have the right to bear and keep arms. But then the soldier part proves it. The soldier part proves that our soldiers were already precedent back then. Our military was already precedent back then. And it was a very serious topic, right? And if you threaten my First Amendment, or if you threaten me, then we revert to number 2. But if we have to, we're going to go to number 3, which talks about war. So so they already had that precedent set. And so I love that, man. I mean, now the thing is where we are today. If we didn't have law and order and we just let everything go, then you'd have people doing what? Taking the law in their hands the other way. They'd go the polar opposite with it. You'd have a bunch of Barney Fives with their little one bullet, trying to shoot their neighbor just because you look a different way or you talk a certain way. So we're at a place now, though, until we get every household back on, like we're talking about, education, the good, the respect, the language, the verbiage, all of it, until we get back to that, so we're in that. So we couldn't have it where we didn't have law and order. So, the other thing I was telling someone this week is kind of off subject from this, but still, it's like if President Trump went in right now, like a faucet or a light switch, and said, all right, put the gas down from $2.79 to $1.50, put this to this, then you'd have the lazy people see that, oh, they can just do that. Well, then we would never have a system either of look at all our corporations we have. Look at all of our town halls, our city halls, our county seats, our state capitals. Look at all the things that people don't think of. That responsibility we're talking about. Look at the financial system. Look at everything that we have that works in basically either what do you want to look at, a hamster wheel, you want to look at cylinders or pistons in an engine. Look at all the things that we have that we've placed out there with our lifestyles. We go get food now from a grocery store. We get milk from a store. You don't get it from a farm anymore. Some people do, but they're very few and far between versus what it was with my grandfather and those generations. It was predominantly all straight from the farm, not a store. We put everything over in this system, and now we've got too big. The government got too big, and the way we live got too big. But you can't go right in and just turn it on like a faucet or turn it off, because then you would create laziness with the ones out there who are already lazy and don't want to do anything. And then you would grow more. You'd have more who goes, oh, if they could just turn it on and off like that, then why don't they do it all the time like that? So see, you got to set this standard, and it has to be done that way. So I was been talking about that a lot lately, is how people have to see it done. I know they get tired of hearing that, but you have to, because we got so big with government that we got so big with markets out there. So how do you bring that down? It's kind of like Lewis Herms and all these other people. He may not be the originator of it, but you got the frog in the boiling pot of water. Well, water's natural habitat for a frog, but that frog jumps in this water and you don't realize it's a pot and it's on the stove. And someone turns it on and he's going, oh, shit, it's got hot, right? Well, that's what has happened to people. Oh, shit, and then it's like, whoo, turn that thing down, right? But you can't just go in there and just, you got to ease it down, right? And then get him out, say, hey, man, you should watch where you jump next time. So,
and that relates directly to, you can't tell them.
Yeah.
You got to show them.
You got to show them. And that's why I've been trying to tell people, I've been saying this for years. I'm like, your First Amendment don't mean jack doo-doo if it don't support the foundation. It don't. Right? Now, you can be gay and support the foundation. You can be Buddhist, support the foundation. You can be whatever you want to be, support the foundation. That's why a lot of people, and I don't like embarrassing people, but there were some gay people that came to watch me speak in Utah and love me, right? Because they don't have anything to do with that. And they get it too. Everybody gets it that, look, they can't have their way of life without someone that thinks like me, because they do understand that your freedom that surrounds you is only because of ideologies like me, right? No one's taking your rights away. President Trump ain't taking a right away. They just said, we're not going to fund this. We're not going to put it in schools. We're not going to do that. And now the other thing I was thinking of today, I was like, if you're born gay, then you're already gay. If you're born gay, now, I'm not talking about people who don't believe in that you're born gay. I'm just saying the people who do think they're born gay. That's that terminology I tell people. So if most of these people say they're born gay, then what you do to them is say, okay, well, you're born gay, then all right, you're one in a class of 40, let's say. Why did the other 39 need to know that to be taught that you're gay if you're born gay? Right? That's just a waste of, like, okay, just be gay then. We're learning algebra here. What's that got to do with you being gay? Right? So look at the stuff that they cram down our throats that way. And that's what liberals don't understand. They'll hear, oh, well, you say we're cramming it down your throats. Well, it's a metaphor, right? You were saying that you're wanting that a class that's about algebra to all of a sudden be told that, hey, this person over here is gay and you can't do that. What the hell? They're born gay. If they're born gay, then they already know they're gay. Are you gay? Okay, cool. X plus 2 equals 6, subtract the 2. That gives you X equals 4. What's that got to do with you being gay, right? So that stuff, right? All this DEI, all this stuff is stuff, right? It's noise. It's stuff that was applied and don't even need applied, right? Because if you're just born gay, you're gay. If you're Buddhist, you're Buddhist. If you're whatever you are, right? And okay, go to work, shut up, do what you're supposed to do at work, go home. All right, whatever you're doing, like, do that. So the people, that's why President Trump, it's even on the surface, there's so many gay people who voted for him. There's so many different people who's voted for him, all walks of life, because they're tired of all this noise and this stuff and this BS, and it's just noise, right? And so the First Amendment is key, but it's also key that people to know that the amendments were, the Bill of Rights were there all in one package, all right? And they all support each other. Right. And it also supported the way of life. All right. And they were amendments for a reason. It didn't over, secede or the Constitution, but it was balanced. Right. And look at what we don't have now. We don't have balance for people out there because they don't know how it was written and where it derived from. So that's what we got to do. And President Trump, that's what the 1776 Commission report was about, and the defunding. They're using Harvard as an example right now that, hey, if you're foreign over here, right, this is not your right. That's a privilege, right? And that's the little thing like that. People don't know the difference in a right and a privilege, right? Same thing when you go in the military. GI Bill, any kind of medical, dental, Those are all privileges. Those aren't rights. You shouldn't go in the military. That's my right to get that. No, you volunteered. It's a volunteer service. You volunteered, right? You wanted to come into this. That's a privilege that you get those. So you got to do what? You got to do all these things to get those. It's not your right to have those. So there's little things that's being said again, principles that are being reset, and emphasis on that. So, it's going to take a little time, but I think that whatever that big finale is, it's just going to like knock everybody on their feet in a good way. That'll speed it up. But then also, as we all know, you take money away, people will shape up quick or they'll ship out quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, just to wrap it up, I don't want to violate your First Amendment rights, but, being a kind of a wordsmith, you're talking about gays coming to see you and loving you and ramming it down your throat. I'm just curious what's going on there.
Oh, wait, what? Oh, man, that was nasty. No. Oh, hey, no, they were in Utah, man, and they were wearing the Dash Matters, and it's like really cool. Like I tell people, I'm like, the military. When you go in the military, you adapt to the military. It don't adapt to you. And so like the gay topic out there, like I tell people, military don't care if you're gay. They're not removing people because they're gay. They're removing the trans because the people. What happened? All that DEI got into the military, and people go, "Oh, you can go in there and they can get surgery on the who? You, the taxpayer, right?" So the gay people are not being touched, right? So they're not being affected with that. And so, like I tell people all the time, like I don't condone lifestyles, but what I tell people is that the only way you can be free in this nation truly is to have ideology like mine, and then you get your choice. I don't want someone's choice to be taken away because someone else says, "Oh, I don't like them, I'm going to kill them." Right? Well, I'll take up for someone and fight for that person. I don't condone their lifestyle, but they should come to the realization like everybody else got to as a kid. Like my dad said, you turn 18, you move out of the house, 19, whatever age you move out, then you can go believe whatever the heck you want to believe. You can do whatever you want to do. If you can pay for yourself, then fine. But he said, even if you can't, if you can move out and you still like be funded a little bit, then guess what? I'm going to have a say so. As long as I have money, I have a say so. And so that's what I've been trying to teach people too, is that, look, I don't condone certain things out there. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not an atheist. I'm not any of that. However, if I know someone that is, I still would not let them be persecuted by somebody or bullied or whatever it may be. I'd say, no, I want them to come to the realization when they come to it. They need to come to whatever it is. And if they can stand on their own 2 feet and die that way, I don't know. Maybe God has something that I don't know. I'm not God. Won't ever be. I mean, when my grandpa always said, the only people we're going to know is when we take our last breath. Then we're going to find out. And my grandpa always had this mentality that, he always invited the Mormons in. He went to Greek Orthodox Church. He saw all different. He did everything he could. Small town country boy, 6th grade education, lied about his age, get in the military, and flat top guitar picker like nobody's business. The one that was roommates with Hank. But he always had this mentality, and I love it because it was in a movie. Whether they were good or bad doesn't matter, but the Bucket List was still a good movie with the principle behind it, where he said, if I come to this place one day, I hope that he's there to vouch for me. Well, I tell people all the time, I may be wrong about something spiritually, but because I treated people with dignity and respect, and I listened to them on the way they believed on something that we don't have a solitude answer on. We have a belief, but we don't have a solitude answer on it. We have a belief that God created the earth and that he sent Christ. But until we take our last breath, I could get to a gate one day and it'd be like, man, you were wrong about everything. But guess what? Someone that was a Buddhist or something completely out far-fetched, they may be like, you know what? I know that guy, though. He was so this and he was that and he was this. And they may come down there and vouch for me. And that's what I try to tell people is that with gay people, I'm not condoning the lifestyle itself. But what I say is that I don't know how they were taught and how they got to where they got. But I don't want them to get hurt for their belief. But they could still be taught the way of the laws and orders that, hey, this is why you're gay. This is how you're gay and why you're gay. All right. I don't condone your lifestyle, I don't want you to get hurt though. And so there's a way to do that. And so, yeah, I know you're making a joke there, but still reining it in there. But, I just think it's amazing because it debunks every bit of the homophobe and everything else that President Trump is accused of all the time. Because, again, all it takes is one person from each walk of life that's the polar opposite of him that voted for him, though, to break up everything out there, all these phobias that people say. Because you have to take them into consideration and go, well, why'd you vote for President Trump? You're gay. Why'd you vote for him? Most of them say, because this, and this. He's a businessman. He gets things done. And my gay life, they'll say their gay lifestyle has nothing to do with, how to run this nation, which is accurate. And so that's what I try to get people to go is that, look, you can still believe exactly the way. You can be staunch in what you believe, but you still need to be a humanitarian from the standpoint of, look, we have to have a precedent. We have to do the due process, and there will be punishment. All those things were hijacked through the years, and they were used in weaponization forms like President Trump talked about, the good old boys and the good old girls, right? And all these different people in these high societies and all these lobbyists and everything. And I went back, was watching the debate today in 2016, the highlight reel. Someone has one up, and he's sitting there. He is when he told Jeb Bush to shut up. And they started booing. He goes, there's all his donors out there. And they kept booing even more. He said, it's true. He was like, we, talking about his people, tried to get tickets for people to come. And he said, we were told that all the seats were taken by the RNC, told us that they were taken by the donors, right? So he was already busting everybody then. He said, I'm on my time, on my dime, and everything on mine. So he was already telling everybody right then that we're about to go into a military occupation, because he was leading the polls drastically. But, the donors, the lobbyists, the contractors, and so all these people that have controlled all this narrative for all these years, and that's what I try to tell people is that, look, I don't condone certain things, but there's a way to live and let live, and the way you live and let live is what's going to bring us back to not the division. When we start accepting everybody for what they are and let them come to their own, as long as they're not doing it to your children, they're not doing it down here at the schoolyards and the drag queens and all this other BS. Once you live and let live, let someone go back to their household, believe the way they are. If they're doing everything the right way, that's what's going to bring it back. And then also still being strong, still being tough on, okay, we got a new accountability, responsibility, and here's how it's going to work. Here's our communication levels. If you do this, you burn a flag, you're in jail. If you do this, you get that. And then you have your tier system on your punishment system. And then you enforce those. And, you have that accountability there. So, all that's been reset. And so I guess it's just cool to me to see all the different walks of life that do, come out and support. And you can see it without being judgmental. You can see certain people with their hairstyles and their partners and things of that nature. And you know it, right? Because that's just the way people are. But it's cool to me to see people wearing like President Trump and going, yeah, drain that swamp, baby. And knowing they're polar opposite than you in their lifestyles. It's just cool because that's what's going to lead into that. Because the more who get it, who are different than the old white man in the suit.
Oh, man, you can't get stuck at this point.
Then that's going to keep opening and opening again that we're talking about. Yeah. Well, it's going to get us back to that precedent that we're talking about. And then, no one can be able to say, well, you're this and you're that. No, because there's going to be like so many who are so opposite than him. I've met all kinds of people, spiritual people who are hippies, and spiritual people who are this, and people who are, way out on the limb with like their spirituality, like they believe in aliens and this and that, whatever they want to do, but they still have that fundamental core of what allowed them that freedom. And, that's what's going to create that back. Because I'm like, I don't know. Hell, there may be aliens. When people hear stuff like that, I'm like, I don't know. I don't talk about that. I don't think that's precedent. But I'm like, people will go, oh, they believe in this. I don't believe in that. They can't be accurate. Well, you got to be able to separate what is like what maybe their hobby belief versus what is a core foundation. like laws and orders is a core foundation, and our ideology of our nation has a core principle and fundamental, foundation. But just because someone believes in something over here, don't mean that they're inaccurate on the core foundation of what allowed them to believe that. And I think a lot of people have kind of gotten hung up on that. But I do try to stay away from certain topics when I'm on podcasts because people don't know how to separate that. But at the same time, that's what we got to get back to. It's going, dang, man, you believe in aliens? All right, tell me about it. And I mean, if you're interested, like that, or you believe in ghosts? Okay, well, I don't, and I'll tell you why. Because if there were ghosts, and if I became one, I'm gonna haunt the crap out of somebody. I'm gonna move your fork randomly, like you're gonna be sitting there trying to eat, and you're hungry, and I'm like, nope, you're not eating today. Then move your fork around. I never see that happen, so that's why I don't believe in ghosts. Right. So when people say, well, you believe in ghosts the wrong way. I'm like, what? If you can't be a cool ghost, I don't want to believe in it. So it's like, people want to argue over the dumbest things and get mad and malicious and vicious. And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, man, if you believe in something and I don't, if it's not a core, whatever, and it's not hurting me, it's not hurting a child, cool, whatever. Believe whatever you want to believe. If you want to believe Elton John and the spider monkey get on a carpet and ride across New Mexico at 3 a.m. and there's an alien that drops down all the time and they have this like little jam concert all because you're smoking a doobie, that's the real reason, whatever, I don't care, right? So I won't want someone to hurt you over it. So that's like getting back to that core, right? Going, all right, some people are just mad because they're just mad, they want to be mad at something. It's like, why are you mad?
That's where we've gotten so far afield. It's just a simple fact. We can't have a simple conversation.
Can't have a fun conversation. Just a fun conversation.
People can't agree to disagree. They have to argue. So hopefully that will be changing. But I got to tell you,
I believe it will.
This has just been absolutely wonderful. Especially, I get to be in my wheelhouse and showed a different side of you that was just phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Well, it's fun to talk. It's fun to get to do that sometimes, just to sit back and have a fun conversation like we're talking about.
Exactly. Exactly. If more people would do that, boy, would we be in a better place.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, especially get around a veteran at a campfire. You just no telling what you'll hear. So, and that's what I tell people. Everybody needs to find at least one veteran and get around a campfire, and then you'll have a whole new perspective on life.
Very, very interesting stuff. Well, I got to thank you. It's been just absolutely awesome. Got to do this again. I'm got to do it again soon because this was just great. I want to thank all of you for watching tonight. It's been going on 3 hours already, and we're holding a great audience here. As a matter of fact, we're holding a very big audience here. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I hope you all enjoyed it as much as Derek and I did. And I want to thank, of course, Claudia, Kat, Kerry, and Doug, without whom none of this would have been possible. They are the lifeblood of this entire thing. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you again next week for another Respect. Good night, everybody.